Hey guys, welcome to part 4 of What If Naruto Changed His Identity. If you enjoy the video then like, share and subscribe and also comment your thoughts as it inspires me to make more such videos, and remember to check out my playlist section for other interesting stories. So let's get started. Chapter 12. Naruto awoke in his favorite position, snuggled against his girlfriend of 2 years, Hana. The last 2 years had been somewhat boring compared to the years prior, but Naruto wouldn't trade them for anything. He had stopped going on constant A and B rank missions and had a chance to settle down. Apparently, once the Sandaime found out he had a girlfriend, he did everything possible to make sure they were together as often as they could be, up to and including running missions together again. It wasn't perfectly smooth going. After all, relationships weren't fairy tales, but the ninja lifestyle often encouraged ninja to be honest and loving, considering your next mission might be your last. It was due to this that Naruto couldn't bear to keep his secrets from Hana for long after they started dating. Within a week of their first date, he had told her the truth. Flashback. Naruto bit into his fingernails and paced across the room for the umpteenth time. He had been looking for the opportunity to tell Hana the truth about himself for the last week, and before he could work up the courage, Hana had been assigned a mission. A Chunan-led Genin team was bringing back a prisoner for questioning when he had escaped and injured the team. The team had made it back with no casualties, but Hana had been deployed with a team of Chunan to track down and recapture the prisoner. Rationally, Naruto knew this would be a simple mission that Hana could complete in her sleep, but he could not stop himself from worrying. Is this what he would go through for every mission she took? What would he do if something were to happen? How could he live with himself for never having told her the truth? Endless questions just like this filled his head as he continued pacing near the entrance of the Inuzuka compound. Hey, what's with you? Naruto spun around from his pacing to see Hana standing just a few feet away from him with her dog triplets. She had an expression torn between confusion and amusement, probably from watching his strange behavior. Hana! Naruto cried, happy to see her safe. Are you? Naruto started before trying to regain some of his lost sense. How was the mission? Easy, Hana said. The guy was pretty smart, making it to a major city, but he underestimated an Inuzuka's nose. Wasn't he able to injure some of our ninja? Naruto asked, still relieved she was safe. Just some fangirl wannabe that was stupid enough to basically hand him a weapon and let him take her hostage. Hana snorted, not having a high opinion of many of her female comrades. Naruto nodded, having familiar experiences leading kunoichi like that. Hey, could I talk with you about something? Sure, now, Hana responded, not really aware of the inner turmoil Naruto was currently undergoing. If you need to be somewhere or do anything, I can wait. Can I get a quick shower in first? Hana asked. Of course. Can you meet me at Training Ground 16 in an hour? Naruto racked his brain trying to think of a place they could talk in private. Sure, Hana said, turning to return to the Inuzuka compound for a shower. -12. Naruto returned to pacing in his new location. Training Ground 16 was deserted, thankfully, so it should be private enough to have this talk with Hana. A new nervousness overtook him as he now thought about all the ways his next conversation could go. Would she be angry? Would she look at him with the same eyes the villagers used to have? Man, you're really off your game today, aren't you? A familiar voice surprised him from behind. Naruto, again surprised by her sudden appearance, just gave a short nod before collapsing into a sitting position. He tried to begin, but every time he opened his mouth, more of the questions that had plagued his mind returned. Hana, sensing the seriousness of the conversation, carefully took a seat across from him and said softly, "It's okay, you can tell me anything." Naruto took one last deep breath before going for it. I have a secret. Hana blinked, not really understanding what he was talking about. Naruto continued, I wasn't always named Tsukumo Hayashi. At this, Hana narrowed her eyes as her ninja training started to kick in at this revelation. What was your name before? Naruto Uzumaki. Hana stared at him, analyzing what he was saying but coming up blank. Never heard of it. Naruto looked up at her, doing math in his head. He supposed that she would have been very young when his name was announced, too young to remember. It also seemed that she wasn't aware of him when the village hated him, perhaps because of her clan. I'm a Jinchuriki. Again. Never heard of it. I have a tailed beast sealed inside of me. Naruto eventually said. Hana looked at him with confusion. Naruto elaborated. The tailed beasts can't be killed, they are beings of pure energy. They can only be sealed away. And the only thing that can successfully hold such power is a human child, a baby. What does that mean? Hana asked, with a feeling of fear starting to overtake her. It means that the Yondaime sealed the Kyuubi into me on the day I was born. Naruto said simply. Hana stared at him with a mixture of disbelief, shock, and even a little fear. The two of them sat in silence for almost 5 minutes before one of them finally broke the silence. Why are you telling me? Naruto stared at her in a bit of confusion. I couldn't not tell you. I mean, with us. So why are you using a fake name? Hana asked, trying to get him to keep talking coherently. Naruto's eyebrow raised with a flicker of amusement. Technically speaking, Tsukumo Hayashi is my real name now, since I had it legally changed. But aside from that, when I was younger a lot of the villagers hated me because they didn't understand how a monster like the Kyuubi could be sealed into a little baby. They thought that I was the Kyuubi in human form or something. It became almost impossible to become a ninja or even lead a halfway decent life, so I changed myself. Why would they hate you? Hana asked, still not getting it. Because I was different. People hate what's different. Just like in Kiri where they hate bloodline users because they're different, people hated me here because there was something about me they didn't understand or even feared. And eventually, they liked the idea of having someone to hate. I guess life just gets easier when you have someone to blame all your problems on. So why are you telling me? Why couldn't you just keep in a secret for the rest of your life and never tell anyone? Hana asked. Because you matter to me. Naruto said simply. If I really wanted to hide forever, I probably could have done that, but I didn't want to. I wanted to become a Konoha ninja. I want to be respected for who I really am one day. I want people to stop acting so stupid. So, you're trying to change people's minds by becoming a good ninja first. Are you planning to reveal your birth identity? Naruto paused to think about that. That was originally my plan. When I was young I thought I could heal Konoha, but it probably won't happen anytime soon. Why not? I can't tell you everything, but there is an unforeseen bump in my plan. I mean I was really young when I came up with that plan, so it's a bit on the idealistic side. And of course, my experiences since then have made me more realistic and pragmatic, so I'm not in a rush to be recognized again. How many people know all this? Including me and you. 5. Naruto answered. Hana's brow raised in surprise. Only 3 other people know who you really are. I think so. The Hokage and 2 others I happened to be on a mission with when the truth came out. The 2 of them sat, each having a different track of thought. To Naruto, it was wondering what Hana thought of him now. So, what do you think? About what? Hana asked. About me. Do you hate me now? Hana looked at him quizzically, noticing that his facial expression was one she hadn't seen on him before. It was a mixture of fear, regret, and an expectation of future pain. As Hana saw this, she immediately felt her insides soften as she began to understand the fear and pain that was currently infecting him right now. How could I hate you for something like this? Hana said sympathetically. Naruto looked at her with a hopeful expression. Everyone else seems to. I am not everyone else. Naruto felt tears begin to leak from his eyes as he heard that. He could only nod while closing his eyes to try and stop the flow of tears. Immediately after, he felt himself experience something he had only dreamed about until now. He felt himself be drawn into a hug. At first he tensed, as he didn't know what to do, but eventually he relaxed into it. Naruto and Hana remained that way for quite some time, drawing comfort from each other while deepening their relationship. End flashback. Naruto thought back to his first hug with fondness as he subconsciously drew Hana in closer. Since that day their relationship had been progressing slowly but steadily. They had continued dating with increased frequency and saw each other more and more often. Within a year, they had shared a bed together for the first time and now used any excuse to do so again. What are you thinking about? Hana's voice interrupted his thoughts. He hadn't realized she had awakened. The first time you hugged me. Naruto answered honestly. One of my most precious memories. Naruto enjoyed the redness that appeared on her face as she thought back to that day. I thought you had to meet with the Hokage soon. Hana said, recovering from her slight embarrassment. I've still got a few minutes, Naruto responded as he was in no hurry to leave his current position. Any idea what he wants? Considering the timing, it's either a mission or he's going to give me another Genin team. Hana smirked as she remembered last year when the Hokage had tried to give her boyfriend a Genin team. Naruto had freaked out and argued with the Hokage, trying to refuse before finally agreeing to test them. Unfortunately for the Hokage, the team had failed the test rather dramatically, so he was spared that experience at the time. You should think about doing it. Who knows, you might make a good sensei. Hana said, thinking it would be pretty funny to see him try to be a sensei. No way, I still have nightmares about whiny Genin. Reluctantly, Naruto eventually got up to go to the meeting. He donned his face mask and usual attire before kissing his girlfriend goodbye as he left for his meeting. -12. As expected, when Naruto entered the Hokage's office, he was immediately aware of the other Jonin here for the same reason he was. He sighed, now able to confirm that yes, the Hokage was going to try and assign him yet another team. After a few more minutes, the last of the Jonin filtered into the room and the Hokage began the meeting. Well, I believe most of you know why you are here. It's time to assign the Genin teams and see which of them pass to become full Genin. Each of you are here because you have been selected as a potential Jonin sensei. The Hokage's secretary passed out folders containing their team assignments to each of the prospective Jonin. As Naruto received his, he took a quick glance at his team roster to see who he got this time. However, when he saw one of the names, he felt himself panic and feel a certain amount of dread. He looked at the Hokage to see the Sandaime looking at him with a ghost of a smirk on his face. Damn him. He planned this. Naruto thought furiously. Each of you will pick up your students after lunch and give them their final Genin test either today or tomorrow. If this is your first time testing a team and would like help designing a test, please stay behind, otherwise, you are dismissed. Naruto cast one final glare at the Sandaime before leaving with the other Jonin. -12. Naruto waited outside the academy room with the other Jonin, waiting for his turn to collect his potential students. He was currently racking his brains to find a solution, but no matter what he thought of, he couldn't find a way out. When it was his turn, he sighed one last time before entering the room to call out his Genin. Team 8 consisting of Hinata Hyuga, Shino Aburame, and Kiba Inuzuka, please follow me. With great reluctance he called out his girlfriend's brother's name. As they followed him to one of the academy training grounds, he wondered how on earth he could get out of this. Naruto settled himself for introductions before turning his attention to his Genin team. Well, I suppose we should introduce ourselves. My name is Sakumo Hayashi, Jonin of Konoha. I specialize in genjutsu, ninjutsu, and tracking. I like meat, my girlfriend, and being out in the wilderness. I dislike whiny people. Now each of you introduce yourselves. Naruto concluded, pointing to the girl. My name is Hinata Hyuga. I like cinnamon buns and tea, taking care of my sister. I want to make my clan proud of me. Naruto watched the girl struggle through her sentence, wondering what her speech problem was and where it came from. Naruto put it out of his mind for now as he pointed to the Aburame. My name is Shino Aburame. I specialize in my family jutsu. I like bugs. Naruto nodded, having worked with Aburame on occasion and knowing them to be ninja of few words. Finally Naruto pointed to the source of his dilemma. Yo, my name is Kiba Inuzuka and this is Akamaru. He said, holding up his dog for all to see. I'm the best academy student and awesome at Inuzuka family taijutsu. I like Akamaru, lots of foods, and hot girls. I hate that bastard Sasuke for stealing the girls and will show him one day. Naruto stared at Kiba, knowing that he was not the top academy student and from what he heard from Hana, was currently behind in his clan training. He decided once again to ignore it for now and leaving them to be surprised by his next statement. Well, I suppose I should start out by saying that while you did pass the academy test, there is still one final exam before you officially become Genin. What? Kiba shouted, while the other two stayed silent, but surprised. Yep. Naruto said. The academy test was to show that you completed the first of your training. The test I give you is where you prove you are ready to go out into the field and be a real ninja. If you fail this, you will be sent back to the academy for more training. But Kiba started before returning to his default personality. No, you know what? We'll pass your test no problem. Let's go. He stood up and made to take the test right now. Hold your horses, kid. Naruto calmed the excitable Genin down. The test will take place tomorrow to give me time to set it up. Meet me at the eastern entrance to the administration building tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Until then, I suggest you prepare yourselves for anything. Naruto shunshined away to return to Hana, to see if she would mind it if he failed her brother. -12. Ha 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 ha. You got Kiba's team. Hana laughed so loudly that the other patrons of the restaurant couldn't help but look at them. Naruto motioned her to quiet down, both to spare his embarrassment from the onlookers and to stop her from laughing at his circumstances. It didn't work very well. Yeah, laugh it up. The Hokage trapped me. If I fail him, I get in trouble with your family. If I don't, I have to spend the next year of my life with whiny Genin. After a few more moments of loud laughter, Hana finally calmed down a little. Seriously though, you can't fail your team just because you don't want them. No, but I can make a test they can't pass. Naruto countered. Naruto, Hana warned in a low and dangerous tone. Okay, then I can make a hard test they probably won't pass. Naruto amended. His girlfriend still looked at him with slightly dangerous eyes. Fine. I'll make a test that they at least have a shot at passing. -12. Naruto had to call in a favor from Ibiki to help him assemble his test, but in the end he was pretty happy. He knew that Jonin relied on different testing method of their own choosing to test Genin. These tests often ranged from easy scavenger hunts to insane teamwork challenges that were almost impossible to complete. Despite what he had told Hana, he never did like these approaches and felt that every Genin deserved a chance to become a ninja, regardless of how the Jonin sensei thought about the prospect. In his last test, he drew a team that was relatively unskilled and was completely unwilling to work together to pass even the easiest challenge he had set forth. Now he was going to try something a little more difficult and complicated, but achievable if the team worked together and used their heads. It took him quite a few clones and much of the night to set it up, but when it was completed, he thought that without the threat of being demoted from Genin, it would be pretty fun. He arrived at the location early in the morning to perform one final checkup to make sure everything had been set up properly, before heading out to lead his team to their test. Good morning, kids, he said a bit enthusiastically when he arrived at the meeting spot and saw his potential team waiting for him. The three nervously returned his greetings, albeit with less enthusiasm. I have your test all set up if you want to follow me. Naruto turned as he said this and led them on a 5-minute walk to an industrial part of town. He stopped at a small warehouse that was used for storage by the intelligence department for non-classified materials and led his students inside. He navigated them to a smaller section in back where his locked room was located. All right, we're here. Behind this door lies a room. I am going to lock you inside the room and you will have to get out. There are a number of rules for this task, starting with the fact that you cannot force your way out of the room or break anything inside. In order to exit, you must collect a key from inside the room. One key will allow one person and only one person to leave the room. There are 3 keys inside total. As you can probably guess, the goal of the test is to find a key and leave the room before the time runs out. Only those that find a key and make it out will pass. One last rule. You must find at least 2 of the keys in order to be able to leave. Naruto explained his complicated test. What is the time limit? Shino asked stoically, although a perceptive person could hear traces of worry in his voice. I won't tell you exactly how much time you have, but I will tell you that you have at least 1 hour and at most 3 hours to complete the task. Naruto answered. And I assume the keys will be hidden or hard to get to. Shino continued. There are riddles and puzzles you will need to solve, oftentimes with teamwork. Naruto answered again. Shino nodded, expecting as much. Hinata looked silent and afraid, while Kiba looked like an interesting mix of determined and panicked, probably due to the lack of physical challenges. Alright then, if there are no further questions, time will start as soon as you enter. Naruto opened the door and ushered them inside. -12. The three children and one dog entered the room with apprehension. None of them were quite sure what to expect and had never done anything like this. Inside the room were random pieces of furniture, fake plants, paintings, random toys, and other various objects. The room wasn't that big, but the multitude of strange objects confused the young Genin. What are we supposed to do now? Kiba said as he spun around in a circle, trying to figure out where a key could be. Let's all take a look around the room. Hayashi-sensei said there were riddles and puzzles that needed to be solved, so let's find them. Shino, trying to keep a rational mind, said. Hinata nodded, activated her Byakugan to search the room. There are P parts O of the room that are invisible to my eyes. She said in a surprised voice, knowing that materials of that nature were for the most part kept secret for the Hyuga clan's protection. Do you see anything? Shino asked. Wait. You under the tea table. Hinata pointed to a medium-sized table in the middle of the room. She moved to turn it over to discover their first clue written on the bottom. Drawer combination. 3, 6, 5, 8. Upon discovering the clue, the three genin spread around the room to find the drawer. Within a few seconds, Shino came upon a cabinet with the drawers facing the wall. Upon alerting the others, Kiba and Shino turned the cabinet around to reveal 4 drawers with combination locks. They quickly entered the correct code in only to discover that it only worked on one of the drawers. Inside the one drawer that would open, they found a box. The box, as ordinary as could be, was made of cardboard and was approximately a foot long and wide, and about 3 inches tall. Inside were hundreds of jigsaw pieces. Well, I wonder what we have to do now. Kiba said rather sarcastically. Hinata gave a weak smile more out of politeness while Shino carefully scooped the pieces out onto the floor. The three started sorting the pieces into edges and colors. After only a minute of sorting, however, they came across an oddity. Another corner piece. Kiba called out enthusiastically as he threw it in the edge pile. Wait, corner? Shino asked. Yeah, Kiba said confused, as he picked up the corner piece again to show it to his teammate. What's wrong with that? The problem is that I have already found 4 corner pieces. Shino replied. I have found a C couple as well. Hinata said quietly. The three sat and pondered this oddity for a while before Shino once again took the lead. Well, either there are extra pieces or this is more than one puzzle. For now, let's finish sorting and each pick a section to work on. Perhaps it will become clearer in time. Each of the genin started working on a section. Surprisingly, Hinata was the most effective at doing puzzles. It seemed that unlike the outdoor-oriented Kiba or the cold logical Shino, she was used to passing the time on her own and had completed many puzzles beforehand. In the end, Hinata assembled a 100-piece picture of a snowman. She moved on to help Kiba, who seemed to be the worst at puzzles, and combined were able to shortly finish a picture of a house. The last puzzle was of a tiger. While the last puzzle was still being assembled, both Hinata and Kiba gazed at the completed puzzles looking for any sign of a clue, but were unable to find anything. It was only when Shino completed the final puzzle that they learned why. It seems that there were 3 extra pieces that did not fit in any of the puzzles. Let's see. We have an all-white piece, a picture of a pot, and a piece with the word, flower, on it. Shino said logically, trying to gain some insight by saying it out loud. Could we be looking for a white pot or a white flower? The 3 looked around the room and immediately spotted the fake flowers, for which there was only one white. The 3 crowded around the flowers, looking at the white one with intensity. What now? Hinata asked. Well, I suppose we look under the dirt. Kiba said as he grabbed the potted flower and started pulling out the dirt and spreading it out among the other pots. Soon, he came upon something metal inside and pulled out the first of the 3 keys. Ha! Found one! Kiba cried out. Indeed, Kiba had pulled out one of the keys to exit the room, but that was not the only thing he unearthed. Attached to the key by a piece of string was a simple key chain displaying another combination. 8852. They entered the combination into the cabinet and again unlocking their next challenge. Inside was a wheel that looked like it was meant to be inserted somewhere and turned. The three once again spread around trying to locate what this was to be used for and where it should go. After a few minutes of not finding anything, they grow discouraged. Damn it, what the hell does this do? Kiba shouted, frustrated in his efforts. Let's think about this logically. The screw coming out the back of this indicates that this is meant to turn something, further evidenced by the shape of the wheel. The wheel itself is a foot wide, so it must be something it can fit into. Shino kept everyone as calm as he could, knowing that panic was no way to solve a problem. Although his speech did calm Kiba down a bit, it did nothing to help the situation they were in. Eventually, Kiba grabbed the wheel-like object and started investigating it on his own. He gripped it hard and knocked his hand against it to see if it was hollow or not. Careful, Shino warned. If we break it, we fail the test. Kiba frowned at that statement, as he was tempted to do just that. Still, he kept grasping it and trying to reveal another clue without breaking it. Wait, Hinata said in a very quiet voice. It was so quiet that Kiba with all his struggling didn't hear her. Shino however, did. You have an idea, Hinata-san. Hinata looked nervous at being addressed, but motioned for Kiba to give her the wheel. Upon doing so, she looked at it strangely for a few seconds before looking around the room. Upon not seeing anything she could use for her purpose, she slipped the wheel under her coat and poked her head in to see whether she had observed correctly. What are you doing? Kiba asked, put off by her bizarre behavior. The W wheel glows in the dark. Shino, upon hearing this, moved over to the doorway and immediately flicked off the light switch. The room descended into darkness, as there were no windows or other light sources. Hinata, upon seeing what her teammate was doing, pulled out the wheel and examined it when the lights went out. As she had said, the wheel glowed in the dark, providing a source of light in an otherwise dark room. There! Kiba cried, pointing to a spot on the wall. Though it was still dark, both Hinata and Shino were able to spot the general direction of where Kiba was pointing and were able to see the spot on the wall. Indeed, illuminated just like the wheel and with the same color, was a single circle on the wall, barely an inch in diameter. Upon investigating, alternating with the light on and off, they found that the spot on the wall could be removed to reveal a hole in which the wheel could be inserted. When Hinata placed the wheel in place and started to turn it, the three genin were shocked when a portion of the wall started to rise and reveal a hidden room. When the wheel had been fully turned, Kiba and Shino went in to investigate. Unfortunately, the wheel had to be held in place, so Hinata had to stand and hold the door open. Inside was a blank room with nothing inside. What the hell? This is just a dead end. Wait, maybe we need to turn off the lights again. Kiba declared before rushing off to turn off the lights. Anything? Kiba asked as he turned off the lights. Nothing. Shino responded, sounded slightly dejected. Shino exited the room and Kiba returned from the light switch. Hinata, in the meantime, allowed the door to lower so she would not have to hold it open. What now? Kiba asked. The other two didn't know what to say. Eventually, after a few minutes had passed, Hinata worked up the nerve to quietly ask if she could see the room while one of the others held the door open. They repeated the previous actions, only this time Kiba opened the door for them. As the door was opening, Hinata ducked in and took a look around the room, only to notice something in the corner of her eye. Wait, Hinata said. As Shino walked in the room, he took a look around to see if something had changed, only to see nothing. I don't see anything. There was something in here when I first entered, but it's gone now. Hinata said. Shino thought about what she had said, almost ready to dismiss her when he had a thought. Kiba, close the door for a minute, then open it again. Kiba did as he was asked, albeit with a little grumbling at being ordered. When the door closed, it seems as though a window opened to reveal the purpose of the room. When the door was opened, the window was closed. Sneaky, Shino thought. When the window was open, they discovered that it revealed a maze that was built vertically into the wall between the two rooms. On this side they could see the maze in entirety and at the end was a very visible, but unreachable, key. Kiba, open the door. Shino called. After getting a good look at the maze, he had a good idea what they were supposed to do. As the door opened, Shino and Hinata both exited and alerted Kiba to what they had discovered. Shino made his way over to the wall that held the other side of the maze. He quickly discovered a small pole sticking out of the wall here and a small gap in the wall that provided an entrance to the maze. It was possible that he might be able to fill the maze with his bugs, but it was unlikely that they could retrieve the key on their own. Hinata, can you see the maze with your Byakugan? Shino asked. Hinata briefly went through her hand seals to activate her blood limit. After staring for a few seconds, she shook her head in the negative. As she was about to disable her bloodline, she seemed to notice something else. I can't see the M maze itself, but I can see around the maze to the other R room. If someone S stands there and P points in the R right direction, I think I can follow. Shino listened to all of this before nodding in confirmation. Okay, let me take one last look at the other side. Kiba. At this, Kiba understood that he would be in charge of opening the door. Growling lightly at the chore he was forced to do, he nonetheless opened the door and closed it after Shino had gone in. After inspecting the maze more carefully, he discovered that the small pole on the other side was connected to a magnet on this side. So that when Hinata navigated the maze to the key, it would stick to the magnet and she could guide it back to the entrance of the maze. Nodding in confirmation at the plan, Shino began tracing the maze to find the correct, shortest path to the key. After finding it, he quickly committed it to memory. Shino exited the room after banging on the door to let Kiba know to open the door. After relaying his discoveries to the rest of the team, they began their plan. Shino stood in room, just off to the side of the maze, pointing in the direction of where Hinata should go in the maze. Hinata followed his directions, but had to take it slowly in order to navigate the maze correctly. The two made plenty of mistakes at first, but thanks to Shino, always made it back to the correct path. After 12 minutes, they were rewarded with the key being stuck to the magnet. After another 10 minutes, Hinata was able to pull out the key from the gap in the wall. The team had collected their second key. Okay. Second key. Woo. Kiba declared loudly. Hinata held the second key protectively as she motioned for Kiba to let their teammate out. Kiba almost began opening the door when he paused. We have 2 of the keys right now and who knows how much time left. If me and Hinata leave now, we're guaranteed to win. Kiba thought. He was about to relay his plan to Hinata when he heard a growl come from behind. It appeared as though Akamaru had worked out what he was thinking of doing and had something to say regarding that. At that point, Kiba decided just to keep his mouth shut and open the door for Shino. As Shino exited the room, he glared briefly at Kiba, not that anyone could really tell, before moving over to the key. After examining it, he discovered a similar string of 4 numbers and began entering them into the remaining 2 drawers. The first drawer he tried opened to reveal an odd-looking circle of paper covered in letters, a note card with some sort of alphabetic code on it, some construction paper, and a pair of scissors. He brought everything out and placed it on the table for his other teammates to see. The 3 gathered around the odd materials trying to figure out the purpose of the objects. The construction paper was pretty ordinary and it was a normal pair of scissors, so it seemed to come down to the circle of paper. Around the edge of the circle was a complete alphabet and inside the circle was the same alphabet in both random order and placement within the interior. Shino, having recognized this from the academy lessons, realized that the note card must be an encrypted message and the circle was the cipher to figure out what the message was. Unfortunately, they were missing a large piece of the cipher. What is it? Kiba asked, completely lost at what he was seeing. It's an encrypted message, Shino said before holding up the circle of paper to show his teammates. This is supposed to be the cipher to figure it out, but there is a piece missing. There should be some sort of overlay that goes on top. I believe it should be a circle of paper with holes in the middle and a notch on the edge of the circle. You find the letter around the edge and place the notch over it, then only one letter from the middle should be visible. That's how we decode the message. Kiba still looked a bit confused but Hinata nodded along. Any idea where the missing P piece is? Hinata asked. Shino shook his head in the negative. Hinata once again activated her Byakugan to begin looking around the room for something that matched. Shino started inspecting the furniture for anything hidden that might look like what they were searching for. Even Akamaru was examining the room from his own unique perspective. Kiba started looking in random places, not really sure exactly what he was supposed to be looking for, but decided to keep his search close to the keys in case he got some indication that time was running out. After 5 minutes of searching, no one had found anything and they had searched most of the room. Shino, who was by now the default leader at solving these intellectual exercises, called his teammates over so they could discuss a new strategy. I'm not quite sure where we are supposed to find the design of the overlay, but due to the fact that we got construction paper and scissors, I assume we have to make one. Anyone have any ideas on how? Shino asked the others, not coming up with it himself. Kiba shook his head in the negative, starting to at least figure out what his teammate was talking about a little, but still having no idea where to look. Hinata kept her eyes activated in order to try and spot something, but no matter where she looked, could not find anything. The three eventually went back to searching, but as more time passed, they began to get more and more frustrated. Since they could leave the room now that they had 2 keys, the pressure was mounting to secure their place on the team and leave the others to fight over the remaining key. Kiba, who at this point was facing a dilemma. Torn between taking a key and running or trying to help the others, he didn't know what to do. He knew that he could probably get a key and get out before his teammates realized what was going on, but he hadn't done much to solve the clues so far and wasn't sure if he could turn his back on his clan's most valuable trait, loyalty. Think, Kiba. He mentally berated himself. You're supposed to be the best tracker clan in the village and you can't even find something in the middle of a room. Okay. What did mom say? Kiba thought about all the lessons his mother and sister had given him until now, trying to remember something that would help him. Wait. Sometimes the best way to hide something is in plain sight. That was a lesson his mother had taught him. Kiba quickly looked around the room and tried to analyze the best way to hide something like what Shino had described. He let his eyes fall across the room, slowly deciding whether he could or would hide a design in anything that his eyes landed on. After taking inventory of the room, he finally set his eyes upon the pictures on the wall. As he walked over, he could see a number of landscapes, a painting of the 4 Hokages, and various, wait. Shino. Hinata. There. Kiba shouted, pointing at one of the paintings. The 2 others quickly came over to find Kiba pointing at a painting of all 4 Hokages standing together. Kiba was pointing particularly at the Nadaime Hokage. On the front of his shirt was a design shaped exactly like what they were looking for. Shino slapped Kiba on the back, showing a rare sign of emotion, to show how relieved he was to find the clue. He quickly memorized the shape before deciding to just take the painting off the wall so they could copy it as exactly as possible. After carefully tracing out the cuts they would have to make, knowing that any deviation would yield incorrect results, they began cutting in order to make their overlay. Shino then used the overlay as Hinata both called out the letters and took down the results as Shino responded. The first 2 words were 90 and 17. Suspecting what theses were, Shino directed Kiba to enter them into the last drawer before moving on to decode the remainder of the message. As Kiba returned with folded paper, he quickly unfolded it in front of the others to reveal a seal. Before either Shino or Hinata paid too much attention to it, they finished decoding the message. Well, Kiba asked Hinata, who was staring at the results. It says, needs power of 3. Hinata read the results to her teammates. Power of 3. What's that supposed to mean? Kiba asked, though if he was asking his teammates or just thinking out loud was anyone's guess. Shino silently considered the message while studying the seal. He had a bit of sealing knowledge himself, and the inner rings looked somewhat similar to an ordinary storage seal. Power of 3, could it be that simple? I have a hypothesis, Shino declared, alerting his teammates that he had a theory. The inner part of the seal looks like a storage seal. If I had to guess, the 3rd key is in the seal and we need to activate the seal to get it out. I believe the message is referring to the point that we need to all power the seal together in order for it to work properly. In other words, the 3 of us need to power the seal together. The other 2 considered what Shino had said. Neither of them had any real sealing experience and couldn't be counted on to analyze the seal itself. They had no other ideas and time could be running out any moment now. Let's do it, Kiba declared, all ready for a high-risk, high-reward type situation. Hinata paused for a moment before nodding her head. How do we do it? She asked her bug-infested teammate. Shino inspected the seal closely and found 3 points around the outer seal array. Each of us will place a finger on one of the points here. Shino said, pointing out each of the dots. Dot and channel chakra through that finger at the same time. The seal should recognize that 3 different chakra signatures are powering it and release the key. Immediately Kiba placed his right hand index finger on the point closest to him. Hinata followed shortly afterward. Shino paused briefly, allowing his mind to consider any other possibility for this particular puzzle before placing his own finger on the remaining point. On 3, channel your chakra, Shino declared. Kiba and Hinata both nodded. 1, 2, 3. Shino counted out in a steady but firm voice. When Shino called out 3, each of the genin began channeling their chakra. As soon as chakra was added, Team 8 was rewarded with the appearance of their third and final key. -12. Naruto waited out in the hallway, meditating and practicing his limited Yamanaka mind techniques. He had kept up the training from when he studied with Tetsuya Yamanaka, and although he was no expert, he had definitely become more comfortable and more familiar with his own mind. He was not sure how his mind would fare against real intrusion or tampering, but he figured every little bit helped. As he waited for the appearance of his team, he wondered how many of them would exit. He had not made it too difficult and had definitely made the last key easier to get than he had originally planned. He wanted to give them a fair chance at passing, but couldn't help but add some pressure to tempt them into a failing grade. After 2 hours, the door opened and all 3 genin walked out. Naruto internally frowned at this before asking them to show them the keys. When each of them handed him a key, he grimaced when he inspected them and found them to be genuine. Alright, let's go back inside and sit down, Naruto said as he led the genin back inside the room. He took a brief look around the room to make sure that nothing was damaged, so he would have a reason to disqualify them, but everything seemed to be intact. After the 3 genin were seated on the couch and he had taken one of the chairs, he spoke to them. Well, I suppose congratulations are in order. You have all passed the final test and are now full genin of Team 8. As he said that last bit, Kiba let out a loud cheer. Hinata smiled as brightly as she was capable of, and Shino just nodded. Why don't you tell me how the test went? Naruto half asked and half ordered. The genin briefly explained how they found the first key and Naruto nodded along, fully expecting them to get that one at the very least. When they described the challenges of the second key, Naruto could see that all 3 of them understood the importance that teamwork had in completing that challenge. When they got to the third key, they described what happened, but had some questions in regard to the final challenge. What would have happened if we couldn't find the overlay for the cipher? Shino asked calmly. I doubt that I would have noticed it if Kiba hadn't seen it. Would we have failed? The other 2 genin looked at him, recalling the frustration they felt in searching for that particular clue. Well, I suppose that in order to answer that question I should reveal that I was lying a bit when I told you the rules. Naruto started, already seeing the confusion and slight anger in the faces of his new subordinates. I would have failed your team if you had found none of the keys or only one key, if you damaged the contents of the room in order to get a key, and lastly and most importantly if any of you had left the room with anything less than a full team. When Kiba heard that last part, he paled considerably. I intentionally made the last key difficult in order to tempt some of you into leaving a teammate behind. The second key had shown you that teamwork was necessary in order to complete the challenge and would almost certainly be needed in locating the final key. If you had abandoned a teammate in that sort of situation, I would have failed you on the spot. If you had only managed to collect 2 keys and run out of time trying to locate the third together, I would have allowed you to pass. Shino and Hinata looked noticeably relieved at this while Kiba looked a bit miserable. You should also consider yourselves fortunate, Naruto added. I originally made finding the third key even more difficult, but my girlfriend would have been quite angry with me if I had done that. Also, I'd like to point out a small clue that you may have missed. It sounds like you recognize the cipher required to figure out the clue, so my question to you is, who invented that particular cipher? Let me guess, the Nadaime, Kiba said a bit sarcastically. Yep, Naruto said. He invented quite a few of the ciphers and encryption methods that Konoha ninja still use to this very day. Naruto looked at each of his genin, confirming in his head that he was now a Jonin sensei. I've only tested one other team like this and they ended up fighting each other over who would get the first key that they were unable to cooperate in order to get any others. This test shows the importance of critical thinking, teamwork, and keeping your cool. Those are probably the three most important values I look for in genin. It would be my honor to train each of you. -12. After dismissing his new genin team, Naruto made his way over to the Hokage's office to report his acceptance of the team. As expected, the Hokage looked particularly smug at the prospect, which made Naruto determined to pay him back somehow. With the next year promising to be nothing but D and C ranks, he would have a lot of time to plan. After leaving, he felt determined to find Hana, despite the fact that she would be unbearable when she heard the news. Although Hana was indeed the way he thought she would be, she more than made up for it that night. After an hour of passionate love-making, Hana made her way back home, unfortunately not able to spend the night with him. Naruto sat at his table late at night, making a plan for how the next few weeks should go. He would have to better understand the current skills and physical levels of his subordinates, so tests would be in order. Then he would need to begin both individual and teamwork training, not to mention take a few D-rank missions in between. Additionally, because these were children of the clan leaders, he would be expected to meet with each of their parents to introduce himself. He knew that, like Hana, soon would be a bit unbearable now that he was teaching her son, but the meeting would be pretty informal. He supposed that the Abarames would probably be short and quick, due to their stoic personalities. The real problem would the Hyuga clan. He would probably need to make an appointment, dress appropriately, review his manners, and act like they were superior in every way. He sighed just thinking about it. -12. Naruto arrived early at their training ground, mentally preparing for what it would be like to teach genin. As his new genin started to filter in one by one, they sat and waited patiently for everyone to arrive. Kiba, the last member to arrive, burst into the training ground with his faithful puppy in tow. "Hey sensei. Hey Hinata-chan, Shino." Shino nodded politely and Hinata murmured something that sounded like, "Good morning." "So what are we doing today?" "Our first mission?" Kiba asked excitedly. "No," Naruto said patiently. "Today I will be evaluating your current physical and skill levels to decide what training you need to do in the future." "Cool. Let's go," Kiba yelled. Naruto sighed yet again, deciding between reprimanding him for his shouting or keeping silent. In the end he decided that a little exuberance was warranted and didn't want him to lose the drive. "Alright Kiba, you can go first. First I will test your taijutsu, strength, and speed. Come at me with full power." Naruto got into a light stance, ready to analyze his loud student. As expected, Kiba charged at him with Akamaru following. Naruto batted his punches and kicks away, noting that while Kiba did have pretty good speed and strength for a genin, it was wild and uncontrolled. Naruto and Kiba kept this up for the next couple minutes, but while Kiba showed he had good stamina and endurance, he also showed that he had no other strategy. "Enough," Naruto eventually declared. "Shino-san, you're up." The silent Aburame stepped up to show his skills to his new sensei. While he didn't use the insect justice that his clan was world-renowned for, he did manage to show excellent genin-level taijutsu. He was calm and patient in his strikes, and while not managing to do much damage against a Jonin, did show potential for the future. "Good job, Shino-san," Naruto said, calling an end to the fight. "Hinata-san, your turn." The girl nervously made her was to him and got into a shaky stance that emphasized her attitude. When she made no move to attack, Naruto began the spar himself. Although he was attacking with less speed and strength than the two boys, Hinata seemed to only just barely defend herself. Naruto began to get frustrated by Hinata's skills, especially since she was only defending when he purposefully left blatant openings for her to attack. "Stop. We will work on your taijutsu in the future, Hinata-san," Naruto said while trying to hide his disappointment. Hinata seemed to pick up on it anyway, if the way she hung her head was any indication. "Alright. Let's start with some chakra control training for our first training exercise." Are any of you familiar with the surface clinging exercise, or as it's commonly known, the tree climbing exercise? Hinata shakily raised her hand, despite the fact that it looked like she would rather to anything else but draw attention to herself. Chakra control was necessary for her clan's taijutsu style, so she had been taught quite a few exercises before her clan had stopped training her. Very well, Hinata-san, why don't you show your two teammates the exercise? Naruto said while pointing to a tree. Hinata slowly made her way over to the tree, made the ram seal, and walked up the vertical surface of the tree. Kiba started freaking out at the seemingly impossible feat, whereas Shino just adjusted his sunglasses. Excellent job, Hinata. Naruto praised his female student as she started blushing, clearly not used to being complimented. As you can see, Hinata is using chakra to stick her feet to the surface of the tree. If you use too little chakra, you will just slide down the tree. If you use too much chakra, you will be blasted off. The key is to find the exact amount, which makes it an excellent chakra training exercise, as well as a very useful jutsu for the field. Now each of you try. Naruto said while pointing to two adjacent trees. No problem. Kiba said as ran to the tree. As Naruto expected, Kiba did not have enough chakra emitting from his feet and promptly slid down the tree. Shino on the other hand approached the tree slowly and seemed to try the exercise one step at a time. Naruto nodded at the two of them as they continued to practice, neither one giving up or showing any discouragement. Hinata on the other hand had seemingly faded into the background and was trying her best to remain unnoticed. Naruto motioned her to come to him and she reluctantly approached. Why don't we try taijutsu one more time while your teammates are working on the exercise? This time, I want you to focus on attacking me. Hinata's eyes widened as she gulped in fear of the prospect. She re-entered her shaky stance and waited the absolute longest time before making a move to attack. As expected, it was slow, off-target, and had absolutely no conviction whatsoever. Naruto decided to just back away a bit and let her attack again. Perhaps if she got into a rhythm, she could improve. After an hour of this, Naruto called an end to the exercise for all three of them. Very well. Serious training will start tomorrow and we will begin to take D-rank missions the following week. Until then, I have a bit of homework for you. Kiba groaned. Homework. That was supposed to be over with when we graduated from the academy. Naruto grinned. This should be easy. I want you to make a list of realistic goals of things you want to achieve as both Genin and your career overall. Shino nodded at the simple assignment while Hinata showed a bit of fear at the idea. Kiba only looked confused at why they would even bother. I would also like to meet with one of your parents in the next week, so I would like Shino-san and Hinata-san to ask your parents when a good time to meet with them would be. Shino and Hinata both nodded at the request. Again Hinata looked fearful at the prospect. Why not me? Kiba asked. I already know your mom, so we can just do that now. Until then, dismissed. Get working on your lists and set up a time for me to meet your parents. Meet me here same time tomorrow. Come on, Kiba. Naruto motioned for Kiba to follow him to his clan compound. -12. As expected, Sume was almost as amused as her daughter was at the idea of him being her son's sensei. While she didn't know about his reluctance to take a team, she seemed to pick up that it wasn't exactly what he expected. While meeting with the Inuzuka clan head wasn't strictly necessary due to the relationship he had with her daughter, he was hoping that she had some advice to give him for his future meetings. I was hoping that you could give me some advice on meeting with the Aburame and the Hyuga family heads. Naruto explained to her. Well, I suppose I could give you a few hints for a price. Sume responded. What kind of price? Naruto asked suspiciously. How about a ring for my daughter? Naruto just glared at Sume, seeing that she was up to her usual tricks again. Alright, just joking, kind of. Sume responded. Shibi is an alright guy, just like his son. The meeting won't last long and you'll be out the door before you know it. Hiyashi on the other hand, well, he might be a problem. Well, that's what I figured. Any tips? Naruto asked, already suspecting all the information she had given so far. I guess all I can say is be polite and get there early. Hiyashi likes to throw his weight around and be the most important person in the room. Yeah, I heard he was a real stick in the mud. Naruto said. Stick in the mud. More like stick the in place his mud comes from. Tsume replied, laughing at her own cleverness. Naruto gave a few chuckles, although mostly to be polite. Anything else? Well, if you married my daughter before the meeting he would probably be more polite seeing as how you'd be the son-in-law of a clan head. Naruto just sighed, seeing as she was now back to this. -12. Shino came through as the very next day he met with the clan head of the Aburame clan. As expected, the meeting merely consisted of Naruto introducing himself, as Hayashi Sakumo, discussing his training plans, and then being escorted out. Hinata said that she mentioned the meeting request to her father, but no meeting was scheduled yet. It was a few days before the clan head finally agreed to speak with him and kept him waiting almost half an hour past the agreed upon meeting time. Hyuga-sama, thank you for meeting with me to discuss your daughter's placement on my team. I was hoping I could use this meeting as an opportunity to introduce myself and discuss what I had in mind for training your daughter. Hiyashi Hyuga merely stared at him with a blank expression combined with a minor glare. I do not care what you do with the girl, she is an embarrassment to the Hyuga family. Naruto blinked at the statement while turning to head to the doorway, spotting the visible form of Hinata just outside the door, well within earshot. You don't. Naruto started before silencing himself as the Hyuga head turned away from him to resume some of his paperwork. Well, as she is a part of your clan, may I ask what days and times you or other Hyugas will be training her in your clan jutsus, so that I may plan my own training schedule accordingly. She does not receive our training. She is not good enough. You may do whatever you want with her, she is unworthy of real training. The Hyuga clan head said, back still turned to Naruto. Naruto held his tongue, despite the fact that he wanted nothing more than to see how the Hyuga fared against him. Very well, I understand. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me, I will try to keep her out of your clan's way. He gave a bow to the clan head and made his way out. Come Hinata-san, let us return to our training ground. -12. As Naruto looked back at the girl following him, he could see that she was fighting tears. Man, what a dick, he thought. Indeed, Naruto wondered if he hadn't been the clan head whether he would be as unpleasant as he was during their meeting. At least he had kept his cool and managed to get a prize that the clan head probably didn't realize he had given. Hinata-san, I apologize for what you had to hear during that conversation. That's okay, Hayashi-s sensei. I'm used to it. Hinata replied quietly. Have you completed your list? Hinata looked at him for a moment before taking out a folded piece of paper and handing it to her sensei. Naruto unfolded and looked at the paper to see only 2 things listed. Get better at Juken and earn her clan's respect. Naruto frowned at this, knowing that if she continued along the path as she currently was, she would never achieve her goals. No, redo it, Naruto said shortly. Hinata looked at her new sensei in almost shock as the tears in her eyes threatened to unleash with one more even slightly harsh word. What do you mean as sensei? I have no skill with the Juken and your clan is refusing to train you. Getting better at the Juken is an almost impossible goal to achieve as a genin. Earning your family's respect is a meaningless goal because it provides no direction whatsoever. Naruto explained as honestly and bluntly as he could. In fact, now that he thought about it, he changed direction of the way they were walking and headed to the Genin library. We are going to the Genin library. I want you to look for subjects that you find interesting that you want to learn. Anything that you find interesting that you might think suits you, add it to the list. But sensei. I mean we. Hinata started. Yes. Naruto said as he stopped and turned to look at her. Hyugas aren't. Hyugas are forbidden from studying anything except Juken and clan-approved jutsu, normally only reserved for main branch members. Naruto interjected with what he guessed she was trying to say. Hinata nodded. Your father has excluded you from Hyuga training and given complete authority of your training to me. I am ordering you to study and train the way I tell you to. Naruto ordered, reminding her of what her father had said. He knelt down and tried to pacify her after hearing this brutal truth. If you aren't suited for Hyuga training, I will help you find a training that you are suited for. Becoming strong in your own way is the best chance you have for earning the respect of your clan. Hinata stared at him, internally debating whether that last statement could ever be true. Hope is the only thing that kept her going since her mother had died and her sensei was talking about giving up the Juken and trying something completely new. I can't promise that everything will work out, but I can promise that trying something new will give you a better chance at finding something your clan can be proud of you for. Naruto stated. Hinata nodded slowly, still unsure of whether this would end well or not. -12. After reviewing the lists of his other students, Naruto gave advice and eventually sent them to the Genin library as well to research realistic things they wanted to achieve as Genin. When they came back, Shino had a respectable list of trap making, basic fuinjutsu, and advanced tactics. Kiba predictably went straight for any taijutsu and ninjutsu that he could find, but Naruto eventually accepted his choices, while internally reminding himself to talk with his mother. Hinata eventually came back saying that she wanted to learn medical jutsu, along with a few other fields. Naruto smirked, as the idea that helping and healing people probably agreed with his gentle student. He made a mental note to introduce Hinata to his girlfriend and see if she could tutor her a bit. During this time, Naruto also began training them in earnest. Every morning of the first week, he would lead them out of the walls of Konoha and take them on a grueling trip around Konoha. Each day, they went a little further away from Konoha, so that their trip would be longer. Naruto refused to have a slow team that needed to stop every few minutes like so many of the genin he had before, so he pushed his students hard. In the afternoons he would help them with whatever field they had taken an interest in. He had already taught Shino how to make a sealing scroll and Kiba a D-rank fireball jutsu. Little Hinata spent the time studying anatomy books under the shade of Konoha's mighty trees. After the first week ended, Naruto decided to get started on taking their first D rank. For some bizarre reason, the Hokage wanted to be the one to hand out these, probably to ingratiate himself to the large number of clan heirs that seemed to have graduated this year. Ah, teammate, Tsukumo, how are your genin team treating you? The Sandaime began, amused at the situation before him. Fine, Hokage-sama, Naruto answered in a droning voice. We're here for our first D-rank mission. Good, good, the Hokage said as he sorted the scrolls on the desk. Naruto couldn't help but see that the Hokage's smirk had widened and felt a chill in the air. Ah, here's one. It seems that a noblewoman has lost her pet cat. Since this is a tracking team, you should have little trouble tracking it down and retrieving it. The Hokage said in a suspiciously casual voice. Naruto, having forewarned his team on what to expect from D ranks, watched as they agreed with the Hokage's assessment of the situation. Reluctantly, Naruto ignored the signs of impending doom and accepted the mission. Chapter 13. Sensei, the target should be in the next meadow. Kiba quietly alerted his teacher and teammates. Naruto nodded as he motioned for his team to stay low. What now? Naruto asked them, curious about how they would proceed. Hinata and I should circle around while Kiba scares the target toward us. Either Hinata or I shall disable the target at that point. Shino spoke logically, while Hinata nodded along. Naruto nodded at their basic strategy, hoping it would work better than the other attempts. As Shino and Hinata left, Naruto sat beside Kiba, thinking about the last few weeks. This was the 5th time that their team had been assigned the Catch Tora mission. At first he didn't understand the problem, but he quickly learned why Konoha referred to it as the demon cat. Since his team was technically the tracking team, they were often assigned to return Tora to his lovable owner. Naruto on the other hand knew that the Hokage took great delight in seeing him suffer through this mission so much now, as he had unknowingly avoided it when he himself was a genin. When Naruto felt that Shino and Hinata were in position, he nodded to Kiba letting him know that it was time. While the Tora missions were unbearable at first, they did teach his students some invaluable lessons. In Kiba's case, it was the value of silence when tracking. As they crept toward the meadow, they spotted the target napping in a sunbeam in the middle of the meadow. Neither ninja allowed themselves to become complacent, however. Both had come to learn that the damn cat would awaken before anyone got close and either run or attack. When Naruto confirmed that Kiba knew the locations of his teammates, he motioned for Kiba to go ahead with the plan. Kiba charged into the meadow, silence abandoned in favor of alerting the cat to his presence and getting it to run straight for his teammates. As expected, as soon as Kiba made the first audible noise, the cat was immediately up and ready to bolt. When Kiba and Akamaru made their intentions clear to the cat, it turned and sped off at breakneck speed in the opposite direction. Fortunately, his teammates had chosen a successful strategy and placement this time, because Tora headed right for where Shino was hiding. Before the cat realized what was happening, it was surrounded by a swarm of bugs eating his chakra and temporarily paralyzing him. -13. Ah. Successful already, Team 8. Iruka-san, what is their time? The Hokage asked one of the Chunan that was assisting him today. The Chunan checked his watch and double-checked a paper to verify their leaving time. It looks like 49 minutes and 2 seconds, Hokage-sama. Not quite a record, but well below the average time of 3 hours. Good work, Team 8. The Hokage congratulated the team. Team 8 muttered their courteous thanks to the Hokage's praise, but after 4 other captures, each of them was getting quite sick of this particular mission. Alright team, there's still plenty of daylight left, so return to the training ground in 30 minutes, dismissed. Naruto stated to his team, as they left to either return to the training ground to rest before he arrived or to grab something to eat before returning. Naruto however stayed in the Hokage's mission assignment room for a bit. Anything else, Tsukumo-kun? The Hokage asked him. I was thinking of taking them on a low-risk C rank either tomorrow or sometime soon. Do you have any missions we would be a good match for us, or should I just look on my own? The Hokage paused and thought over the C ranks he had heard about for the last few hours, deciding if any of them were a good match for his team. Iruka on the other hand had something to say about the matter however. A C rank. They've only been Genin for a month. It's too soon for that. Naruto looked at the random Chunan assisting the Hokage. He looked vaguely familiar, but Naruto couldn't place him. Who are you to question my decisions regarding my team? The Chunan, realizing he was speaking to a Jonin, looked a bit cowed by that fact but pressed on anyway. I was their academy teacher. Experience is one of the best teachers. Mistakes made on low-rank missions are usually easily forgiven and provide a valuable learning experience. Too much training without experiencing real missions can lead to problems down the road. Naruto lectured the Chunan, who he suspected hadn't been on a real mission in quite some time. Besides, it's not like I'm going to start them with a bandit eradication or a protection mission where civilian lives would be on the line. There are plenty of mission types that would be fine for a first mission. The Chunan looked a bit uncomfortable at being lectured at, but nonetheless mumbled an apology for interfering. Naruto looked over to the Hokage to see if he had anything, but after that little speech was more inclined to pick one out himself. The Hokage seemed to agree as he told him that none of the missions he had would suit his request. Naruto bid the Hokage a good day before leaving to rejoin his team. -13. Naruto spent the next couple days training his team while he sent a clone to look through the incoming C-rank missions to look for the perfect mission to start his team with. He needed something that would be low risk, but not a completely worthless experience. As he told that Chunan earlier, bandit eradication was definitely out as well as protection missions, as he didn't want their first experience to have an extra cog in the works in the form of an unpredictable civilian. As Naruto's clone walked into the mission office on the third day, he found it buzzing with activity in a way he had never seen it before. All the Chunan and administrative genin were poring over mission scrolls, correlating them to a map on the wall that hadn't been there before, and pulling out all the stops to locate teams to take missions. Naruto approached one of the Chunan to find out what was going on. Hey, what happened? Why is everyone acting crazy today? The Chunan looked at Naruto as if to yell at him, but stopped when he saw it was a Jonin. Somebody screwed up. The Chunan said shortly, trying to organize the mess of paperwork in front of him. Tax season was supposed to start 2 weeks from now like always, but apparently someone missed the memo that the daimyo called it early this season, so we're rushing to provide protection missions for the tax collectors and money deliveries. Naruto nodded at the explanation, knowing that the fire daimyo was their biggest client, and being caught unaware like this was a serious situation. Every year, hundreds of ninja were called upon to protect both the daimyo's people and ensure the money made it to the capital safely. Naruto thought about the situation and while he would have preferred his team's first mission to not be a protection mission, they would be protecting a government-paid tax collector and not some naive merchant. Besides, Konoha was in a bind and he had to do his part to help. Okay. My Genin squad will take one of the lower-risk C-rank collection missions. Naruto announced to the Chunan. The Chunan quickly directed him to one of the others that was handing out the missions and within a few minutes, Naruto had been assigned a C-rank tax collection mission. He wasn't particularly happy with the details of the mission, but knew the Chunan assigning the missions were in a bit of a bind. -13. The real Naruto was currently training his students in their training grounds. Hinata was practicing basic medical jutsu on a fish, Shino was practicing calligraphy, a prerequisite to fuinjutsu, and Kiba was practicing chakra control. The real Naruto was observing and splitting his time between his team members, but paused when he felt his clone approaching. When he saw the scroll in the hand of his clone, he held his hand up to catch the scroll that his clone tossed over to him. Instead of reading it, however, he merely let his clone dispel to receive the memories. The mission wasn't exactly what he had in mind, but it would work. Unfortunately, he had been handed one of the higher-risk C ranks, due to the fact that this was a Jonin-led team rather than a Chunin-led team. If there was an emergency, he could handle the situation himself. Regardless, he was confident that his team would act professionally and in an emergency, obey his commands. Okay guys, please stop what you're doing and come here. Naruto ordered his genin, as they dropped what they were doing and assembled in front of him. For the last few days, I've been looking for a good C-rank mission to get us started on. As Naruto said this, he could see Kiba's eyes light up with excitement and Hinata get a bit nervous. Shino showed no reaction, not that Naruto expected him to. While the mission we have been assigned isn't my first choice, there was been a situation and Konoha needs extra manpower right now. Naruto explained. What's going on? Kiba asked, still excited, but a bit confused. Every year, the Fire Daimyo collects taxes from the various villages, towns, and cities that make up Fire Country. This is a very complicated process that takes quite some time and many people to accomplish. The capital hires Konoha ninja to see to the safety of their tax collectors, provide the tax collectors with backup in case the smaller villages don't want to pay, and to deliver the money safely to the capital. Needless to say, this is a very important contract to Konoha and unfortunately, this year, due to some sort of mix-up, tax season started earlier than we thought. So, we would normally have teams all set up to do that, but we don't have that right now. Shino concluded. Exactly. Naruto confirmed, glad that his team were getting it. We've been assigned to collect taxes from the villages on the southern tip of Fire Country, near the border of Tea Country. It's mostly fishing villages and rice farming villages, with a few bigger trading towns near the border. As you might expect, many of the poorer villages don't like paying taxes, so this isn't a popular job, and the tax money makes an appealing target for bandits and thieves, so we need to make sure that we handle this professionally and swiftly. The mission will take anywhere from 2.5 weeks to a month, so plan accordingly. Naruto took a look at the sun, figuring that it was about an hour until lunch, so he made a few calculations on how long it would take to pack. I would like to leave before 3 p.m. today, so I'd like all of you to head home, inform your families and start packing. Since this is our first mission, I will be sending a clone to each of your homes at 1 p.m. to help you pack. Naruto paused to think of a time for himself, hoping they could get underway before dark. His 3 students looked determined at their first mission. Naruto looked to each of them for any questions before dismissing them to begin. Hopefully he could find and talk to Hana before he left. -13. As it turned out, Hana was also going to be sent on one of the tax collecting mission. She had been assigned to one of the B-rank missions that would be hauling more massive amounts of money from the major cities to the Fire Capital. These sorts of missions were quite dangerous due to the temptation of all that money and the well-known traveling route. Naruto knew that it was common practice during wartime to hit these shipments and seize the money for the war effort. Even during peacetime, he was sure that many nations contemplated taking a few of these shipments for themselves, if they could get away with it. The two only had an hour between them to enjoy each other's company before Hana had to leave for her mission. Her B rank wouldn't take nearly as long as his C rank, but they had to leave almost immediately. Naruto and Hana spent a few minutes making out and heavily petting each other, but too soon were forced to part ways. Annoyed with this, Naruto made his clones to send to his students' houses to help them pack appropriately while he brooded over not having more time to give his girlfriend a proper goodbye. When he had received the memories of all 3 students, he began making his way to the gate. As he had expected from his memories, Kiba was the first person his clone was able to get into contact with, but he was the one who needed the most help with packing. It had taken only a short wait to gain access to Shino, but he had needed little help. Finally, as he expected, it had taken him quite a while to get past the guards to the Hyuga compound in order to visit the heiress's room, but she had only needed a bit of guidance on what to pack. By the time Naruto had reached the gate, he saw Kiba and Akamaru were already waiting for him, bursting at the seams to get started on their mission. He attempted to calm the boy down, but Shino and Hinata made their way to them before he was successful. Alright kids, the first thing we do when leaving the village is to check out with the Chunan guards at the gate. The gate guard will ask for 4 things: the mission ID number, the name of the mission leader, the team members' names, and their ninja ID numbers. This is to create a secondary accounting of active ninja, independent of the mission office. Naruto explained as he got into the line of ninja either waiting to leave or enter Konoha. After the quick checkout was done, he gathered his team and began to head south. Since he had practiced tree hopping and ninja travel with his team, he thought that they kept up rather well. Regardless, he made sure to stop regularly and make sure that his team was well hydrated. 5 hours after leaving Konoha, Naruto finally sighted a place that would be acceptable for making camp. To the relief of his team, he stopped and told them that was it for today. Hinata, is there any wild game in the area? Hinata briefly activated her bloodline and scouted out the perimeter of their camp. After a few seconds, she responded to the original question. There's AF family of B boars T to the east. AM mother and T3 piglets. Alright, one of those piglets will be our dinner and breakfast. Naruto stated. Hinata looked almost stricken at the idea of killing and eating a wild animal, particularly a baby wild animal. B but we have food. Why do we need to? Never eat what you bring when you can eat what you find. Naruto said, looking at his students before proposing a question. Why is this? Shino spoke up immediately. We can only carry so much food and most of the food we carry lasts for a long time. If we eat the food we carry now, we may run out and not be able to find food later. As opposed to now, when we can eat the food we find and save our supplies for a time when we might really need them. Naruto nodded at Shino. Very good, he said before turning back to Hinata. Unfortunately, the ninja lifestyle often revolves around death. As ninjas, we kill in order to survive. We kill to eat, we kill to get paid, and we kill to live. Death is unavoidable for a ninja. I hope that I can teach you to not be a victim, but you must find the conviction within yourselves to accept the truth if you wish to succeed in this profession. As Naruto was speaking, he thought of all the times he had been forced to kill in his missions. When he had first become a ninja, he was not quite the naive child that Hinata was, but even he was a bit surprised at how much death there really was. Have any of you hunted before? Naruto posed to his remaining genin. Both Shino and Kiba nodded their heads, both having come from clans that focused on hunting and tracking. You two will hunt down a piglet for us to eat. Naruto directed the two, but remember, we don't need an entire mother boar, we'll be leaving first thing tomorrow, so there's no point in wasting an entire family of boars. Shino and Kiba understood what he meant, before silently taking off to the east to hunt down a piglet. Hinata, why don't you get started on a fire? Hinata, who was still upset about the last conversation, simply nodded her head and began to gather firewood. Naruto sighed briefly at the perils of teaching before scouting out the perimeter and deciding whether traps or sentries were necessary. They were still close enough to Konoha that they would probably be fine from enemy ninja, but bandits could be anywhere. Shino and Kiba returned in short order with a 30-pound piglet. It was just a baby considering an adult boar could weigh upwards of 200 pounds, but it would keep the Konoha ninja fed for a few days. Naruto ordered them to drain the blood away from the camp, so as not to attract scavengers while they were sleeping. By the time they had the pig ready for cooking, Hinata had the fire all set up and had already set up a spit for roasting the pig. Naruto nodded at her forethought and could see that even though she was uncomfortable with the idea of killing for her food, she wasn't impeding their efforts. The team roasted their food while setting up their tents and sleeping areas. They gathered water from the nearby stream and set up for their dinner. By the time the pig was ready to eat, the team was tired enough from their chores and from their run earlier to scarf down their first outdoor meal as a team. After their dinner, the team cut up the remainder of the piglet and stored it for later. Naruto then took the carcass and buried it away from the camp, again to avoid attracting scavengers. Okay kids, since we are technically in hostile territory, we will have a sentry posted tonight to watch out for danger. Since this is our first time, each of you will take a 90-minute shift and I will have clones do the rest. Naruto explained to his team. As expected, Kiba had something to say when he mentioned the clone part. Sensei, if you can use clones, why not just let us sleep? Or teach us to use a solid clone? Watch duty is something everyone has to do on missions, regardless of rank. I want you to get started now, so you know what to expect, while still getting a full night's sleep. As for the clones, I want to make sure that you know how to do it first. Clones are not infallible, and unless you use Jonin-level clones, they can be dispelled without the user even being aware of it. Shino and Hinata nodded, although Kiba still looked a bit suspicious. Well then, Kiba, you will have the first shift. After we go to sleep, wake Shino in 90 minutes. Shino will then wake me 90 minutes after that. Hinata will take the final shift and wake everyone else up when it's time for us to pack up and leave. Naruto explained how the night was going to work to his students. -13. The night passed fine, not that Naruto expected any real problems. Hinata had a bit of trouble waking the others up due to her own nervousness and Kiba's ability to sleep like the dead, but once breakfast was started and it was made known that anyone who didn't eat now wouldn't eat until lunch, he got up quick. The team quickly ate their breakfast and started breaking down their camp. Within a few minutes, the area was scrubbed of any presence of ninja and the team was ready to begin their journey once again. This trend continued for the next 3 days as the team grew accustomed to camping with each other at night and traveling during the day. This monotonous activity was only disturbed when Naruto pointed out specific plants that could be used for medicinal ways or the different obstacles that a ninja could face when traveling. Needless to say, the team was more than ready to start the active part of the mission. Team 8 would be meeting their assigned tax collector in the city of Nagashima. It wasn't quite a major city, but it was the biggest trade city on the border of Tea country. As Nagashima had its own garrison of samurai to protect the southern border, the Konoha ninja wouldn't have to be involved in any tax collection here, but it made for a good meeting point. When the Konoha team finally did arrive, they immediately made their way to the government building to find their assigned charge. Naruto had prepared his team for anything, but he assumed to find a grumpy, stickler for the rules, bureaucrat. His team was more than gratified to find out that the man was quite jovial and mellow. His name was Okura and he had been in the business for many years. He knew all the local villages and had made sure that they understood what exactly their tax ryo were paying for. Naruto felt a bit better, knowing that there would probably be less trouble from the villages that don't want to give up their money, but still remained cautious about the possibility of bandits and thieves. Naruto introduced himself and his team to the tax collector before asking if he was ready to depart. Okura and his assistant readied their wagon and horses while speaking with the team about the schedule and route they would follow. They would be taking a counterclockwise route of the southern area of Fire Country starting with the fishing villages to the east, moving north along the coast before crossing over to the western coast and crisscrossing villages and towns on their way back to Nagashima. -13. So far, the mission had gone more or less as scheduled. The tax collector and his assistant obviously couldn't travel as fast as ninja, but they were familiar with the area, so they did not travel unnecessarily slow either. The fishing villages they had visited thus far had mostly been poor communities that, while not eager to give up their money, did so with little fuss. There had been no trouble with thieves or bandits, not that Naruto expected them to be. He figured that if an attack was going to happen, it would occur at the end of their journey, when they were carrying the maximum amount of money. Regardless, Naruto kept up the sentry duty that he had started and made sure to leave an additional clone of his at night to make sure his team was extra safe. After the first week, Naruto assigned Hinata to randomly activate her bloodline to watch out for any signs of trackers, obstacles, or anyone that was overly interested in their group. However, it wasn't until halfway through the second week that they got their first customer. It was quite obvious to Naruto when Hinata had spotted something. She had a lousy poker face, he'd have to work on that. As soon as she began scouting out the area, her eyes widened and she started fidgeting uncontrollably. She nervously and fearfully hurried up to her commanding officer and told him what she had seen. It seems that a small group of men had been following them recently. From what Hinata had described from her observations, they were 5 men on horseback who would be attempting to steal through the use of speed. Naruto silently contemplated with himself on how to handle the thieves. If he were alone, they would be almost no trouble whatsoever, but he had rookie Genin with him. Rookie Genin who had never taken human life. Unlike the other times he had taken Genin on a mission that involved killing, these were his students, meaning he would have to deal with the fallout and any post-mission mental issues that occurred. Eventually he sighed, dejectedly reminding himself that if he spared them the chore of killing this time, he was setting himself up to do it every other time after. Time to say goodbye to their innocence. He mourned to himself. He flagged down his other 2 genin and began to alert them to the impending trouble. Hinata has spotted a small group of horse-backed riders following us. They are likely thieves planning a snatch and grab. Naruto began. As expected, his genin reacted in predictable ways. Kiba had a look of excitement on his face as he imagined beating up the bad guys and saving the day. Shino merely readjusted his sunglasses, hiding any reaction he might have had. The thieves will likely head straight for the wagon, hoping their speed and surprise will shock us into not acting quickly enough. They will then grab what they can and flee. When they do, each of you will use your shuriken and aim for center mass. As Naruto said this last part, he watched as Hinata's face fell, Kiba blanched, and even Shino began to look a little green. Hinata, who had known about the thieves longer and based on the conversation weeks earlier, feared that this would be the outcome. Sensei. If the men A or J just T trying to steal the M money, why do we have T2? I am mean why? Hinata mumbled out, her stutter returning in full force, erasing what little progress Naruto had made so far on fixing it. Naruto looked at Hinata with both sadness and resolution. Hinata, while they are most likely just going to make a run at the money, it's just that, most likely. He said that last bit with extra emphasis. One of them could use the surprise to kill our charge while we are distracted with the others, or they could just be an advance party, here to disable the wagon, making us more vulnerable to a bigger group. Hinata continued to look down, not quite willing to accept that as a good enough reason to take a life. The other 2 or his students on the other hand had recovered from the bombshell he had dropped and looked like they had accepted his explanation, although they were a bit intimidated with the idea of this just being the advanced party. Regardless of theories, Naruto started once again, this time adding firmness and a sense of finality to his voice. The fact is that if these men make an attempt on the money, they will be attempting to steal money that is the property of the daimyo. Stealing from the daimyo is a capital offense and the fire daimyo has made it a requirement of the mission. Naruto chose not to add that it was a good way for the daimyo to clear out fire country of bandits every year, an added bonus for the daimyo, for when they tried to take the money only to fail against superior ninja. The genin started to nod at this, only to be interrupted when Naruto jumped to the side, alerting them that the thieves were making their move. Naruto, who had heard the thieves coming once they had started gaining speed, leapt out of the way so his genin could have a clean shot at the incoming thieves. Shuriken out, he ordered firmly. Both Kiba and Shino drew their throwing stars and assumed a throwing position. Hinata followed more slowly and looked absolutely miserable. A few seconds later the first of the riders became visible as he turned the corner on the road. As the others turned the corner, Naruto could see that 3 of them were wielding samurai swords, of dubious quality, and appeared to be aiming for them. Naruto himself fingered a few shuriken as he removed them from his pouch, knowing that had he been alone, the men would already be dead. Naruto looked to his genin, who were torn between looking at the charging riders and looking to him for orders. Naruto nodded to them as soon as the riders were within Genin throwing range. Fire. His Genin stalled for a few seconds, but surprisingly it was Kiba who threw his shuriken first. The shuriken went wide and almost looked like it was going to miss when it curved back and struck the lead rider in the chest. While the shuriken had been in flight, Shino had apparently let one of his loose as well. Less than a second after Kiba's target had went down, Shino's target, also one holding a sword, took a shuriken right to the neck. Naruto nodded to both of them while at the same time looking to Hinata. She looked pained in a way she had never known before. Hinata, fire, he said again, even more firmly. For a moment, she looked like she wasn't going to do it, but after a few more agonizing seconds she shut her eyes and threw her weapon. -13. Naruto contemplated silently to himself about how he was going to take things from here. The mission had officially concluded with their single interaction with the riders having been the only violence that had seen. As expected, Hinata closing her eyes at the last moment had caused her shuriken to miss the men almost completely. Despite this, she had thrown the shuriken in the end, even if it ended up missing, so it hadn't been a complete freeze. They had returned to their original starting point of Nagashima and dropped their tax collector off. His team still had to wait in the city with the money until the second Konoha team could collect it, but since they were so far south, the Chunan team arrived right on time, as it was their first collection point. That team would pick up money from various other Genin teams before delivering it safely to the fire capital. Both Kiba and Shino had ended up taking lives by making their first kills. Naruto was a bit put out on how to counsel them, particularly Kiba. When Kiba had fired his shuriken, he later expressed that he wasn't quite aware of what he was doing. He would describe seeing the thief as a random target, like back at the academy. By the time he had realized what he had done, the man was already dead on the ground. Needless to say, Kiba was quite a bit put out after that. Shino on the other hand had known exactly what he was doing and had thrown his shuriken only after seeing Kiba get started. While he wasn't taking this as hard as Kiba seemed to, Naruto could still tell he was quite shaken. And then there was Hinata. She had missed her target, but had thrown her weapon. Naruto would have preferred it if she had actually hit one of the men, so that she could have just dealt with it. Unfortunately, she had missed, which meant she had the psychological trauma of having tried to kill someone, combined with the continued fear of the day she would have to actually kill someone. Regardless, Naruto had talked with his Genin, both separately and together, and they were now making their way back to Konoha. Naruto himself was torn between rushing to get back, so Kiba and Shino could be with their families, and taking their time, so that Hinata wouldn't have to be with hers. -13. 2 months later, Naruto stood in the mission office, looking for a new C-rank mission that would hopefully give his team the closure it needed. Since the tax collecting mission, Hinata had grown both more miserable and progressively more insecure. Her stutter had returned in full force and would have annoyed him if he didn't feel so responsible. Most of all, Naruto hated her clan. He refused to call them a family, because any group who could treat a girl like this was not worthy of that name. For the first time, Naruto rejoiced in the fact that he was an orphan, rather than being born into a clan like that. Although they had been on a few more C-rank missions, there was no more killing involved in any of them. Indeed, the missions were more like what he had in mind for their first mission. They had taken 2 delivery missions, one to River Country and the other to Nagi Island. They had also recently returned from an escort mission that was completely uneventful. Despite the fact that nothing violent happened on these missions, he could tell that the possibility of violence was weighing heavily on the young girl. She was constantly nervous, hands shaking, and speaking almost every word with an extremely quiet stutter. If she were anyone else, Naruto would have strongly considered ejecting her from the ninja program or suggesting a nonviolent career path. But no, the clan would not allow that. To them, having an administrative genin as a clan heiress would be an embarrassment they could not suffer. Naruto suspected that the only reason they had not disowned her from the main family was that it would be too publicly visible. Although it was no secret how the branch family members were often treated to Konoha ninjas, many of the civilians and outsiders had no idea as to the true nature of their clan dynamics. Naruto secretly thought that one of the reasons they had not done so was because they were hoping she would one day die during a mission and they could replace her as well as receive public sympathy. Naruto knew that he had to end this behavior. Hinata had to accept the ninja lifestyle and that meant she had to kill. With that in mind, Naruto chose a bandit eradication mission. Pushing Hinata to kill would likely make the problem even worse, but it was one of the only steps available to eventually fix the problem. Sometimes things have to get worse before they can get better. Naruto said to himself, trying to convince himself that this was for the best. -13 warning. Contains unequivocal and disturbing violence ahead. Naruto had spoken with his girlfriend, her mother, and even the Hokage before deciding on this course of action. All of them were familiar with the ninja lifestyle and all of them knew that despite the cruelty of it, it was the best way to move Hinata along. It would not heal her, nor would it even help her, but it would move her along to the point where she could eventually come to terms with her career. Because that was the purpose of the mission, Naruto was able to make some adjustments that normally wouldn't happen. The first adjustment came with selecting the mission. Naruto made sure to find a bandit eradication mission for a low-numbered, but well-hidden group. This meant that their tracking skills would be used and the numbers would not be overwhelming. Secondly, he convinced his girlfriend to accompany them. Although Hana did enjoy going on missions with her boyfriend, she was less than wild about going on one for the sole purpose of attending to a psychologically damaged Genin. Naruto hoped that Hinata would get to know Hana on the way there and see her as a female role model to emulate. Hana was after all an accomplished medical ninja, a strong jonin, a clan heiress, and most of all, not suffering from any confidence issues. These particular bandits were reported to be particularly cruel to their victims. In their last 5 raids, they had raped every woman they encountered as well as some of the men. They seemed enjoy playing games with their victims and only allowed people to go free was to make them do something utterly horrifying to themselves. In the last raid, the only survivor was freed after he willingly removed and ate one of his own eyes. While it was still early to expose his genin to the horrors of the world, particularly these horrors, Naruto hoped that the need for these men to die would allow Hinata to feel a little better about being the one to end their lives. Before they had left, Naruto had spoken with both Shino and Kiba about this mission. Both of them had observed that Hinata was going downhill and agreed to help her accomplish the mission, but not do the mission for her, as that wouldn't help matters in the long term. Both of them were also prepared to give Hinata the support she was missing in her home life. -13. When they had arrived in the area known for the bandits, they did not have to look very far. Unfortunately, the bandits had already found another group of travelers to prey upon. This time, there were no survivors. All 3 of the genin were sickened by the level of depravity that was clearly evident in the state of the corpses. The one woman looked like she had been raped in every available hole before being cut open. One thing Naruto noticed that he did not share with the others was that there was clearly semen inside of the wound, semen that probably did not leak out of the stomach. Naruto made clones to gather the bodies into a pile. While normally he would bury the bodies and mark the ground so that their families could find them and rebury them if they chose to, this time no one argued when he performed a fire jutsu on them. He could see that the bandits were clever about leaving little tracks for any of the local samurai to find them. There was no hiding from a ninja team, let alone a ninja team that specialized in tracking. As expected, his team found their camp a few miles away. After finding and scouting the camp, Naruto led his team away so they could plan and prepare without being discovered by the bandits. As expected, there were only 8 bandits. Despite their skills in covering their tracks, they were completely at ease in the wilderness and were completely unprepared for an attack. There were no sentries and most of them were not carrying any weapons. Naruto looked to Hinata. He could see that she was still nervous at the prospect of killing, but more than that, she was even more sickened by what they had seen from the bodies of their most recent victims. Hinata, Naruto began firmly, but kindly. As I have told you, the ninja lifestyle often requires death. I know this is very troubling for you and it has plagued you the past few months. The men in that clearing are among the worst in the world. There is no need for the violence and depravity they have unleashed on their victims. They need to die. Do you understand that? Hinata listened to her sensei and looked put out that he was addressing her directly in front of her teammates. She blushed in embarrassment and sneaked a peek at their faces, almost expecting to see the same scorn and shame that her family would openly show her. To her surprise, she found none of that. Instead, she could only see kindness and support, and even more surprising, it was directed at her. Eventually, her thoughts returned to what her sensei had told her. She remembered the state of the bodies, and despite the fact that she had already vomited when she had first seen them, not that she was the only one, even Shino had vomited, she felt if her stomach was not completely empty now, she would be throwing up again just from memory of the smell. She mentally knew that her sensei was correct. Violence was a very real part of their world, but that sort of violence was just, she could not even find the adjective to describe it. Honestly, Hinata admitted to herself that the people that did this deserved to die, she just wished she didn't have to be the one to do it. Although her sensei was waiting for her reply, his expression let her know that he was giving her time to think. Not knowing quite what to say, or even trusting herself to say anything properly, she nodded. As firmly as she could. Naruto took this as a good sign, as that nod contained more confidence than he had ever seen her show. You will be the first one to kill them. We will approach from the trees and wait until you are ready. You can take as much time as you need and we will finish the rest when you have. Hinata, again put on the spot, panicked slightly at her near future but again could see that her sensei and teammates were giving her as much time as she needed. Again, not trusting her voice, she nodded. Naruto nodded back, placing his hand on her shoulder to lead her to the trees in the direction of the bandits. Soon they had arrived back at the bandit camp and could see that the bandits were still lazing around, many of them without their weapons. Hinata crouched on a tree branch next to her sensei as he gave her his silent support. After 10 minutes, Hinata had moved her hands toward her weapons pouch, but had yet to pull out a weapon. Naruto made no move to rush her. He had spoken with his other teammates and warned them about this. They were prepared to wait all day if that was required. Hinata needed to choose to do this, she needed to consciously do it, and most of all, she needed to successfully do it. Hinata herself was cycling between panic, fear, embarrassment, and a variety of other emotions, all of them negative. More than once, she looked to her left to glance at her sensei, but all she saw was kindness and patience. It calmed her down for a moment, but only a moment. As she watched the bandits, she saw 2 of them move a bit toward them. Briefly, she panicked, fearing they had been discovered, but they were just trying to find a more comfortable patch of grass. After the fear had died down a bit, she realized she could hear them talking. As she listened, she realized with mounting horror that they were talking about how they had enjoyed raping their latest victim and how it compared to other rapes and mutilations. Subconsciously, she pulled 2 shuriken out of her pouch without truly realizing it. With every sentence happily reminisced by the bandits, she felt an anger she had never known rise up from her. That kid was one of the best, but tell you one that's even better. One of the bandits replied to the other's story. What's that? The other asked. The next one. In fact, let's go find her right now. With that the bandit stood up and started making his way to the others. With the declaration that they were going to do it again, Hinata threw her shuriken with all her might. Both of the shuriken in her hands aimed true as they struck the bandit's center mass. Hinata blinked, slightly shocked at what she had just done. By the time she had regained her senses, her teammates and sensei were finishing off the remaining 6. Hinata looked at the bandits she had killed before turning her eyes to her hands. She had just taken not just 1 life, but 2. -13. Naruto stood in the Hokage's office, contemplating the last week. The trip back was uneventful, although they did take their time getting back. Hana had spoken with Hinata and had been a comforting presence to Hinata when she had nightmares the first night. Both Kiba and Shino had stuck close to their teammate while traveling, not allowing her to feel like she was alone. Naruto allowed himself to feel pride at the unity his team was beginning to show. When they had returned to Konoha, Hinata did show some improvement in the areas she was struggling with in previous months. Although her clan still didn't do her any good, upon finding out that she had successfully killed did make them a bit less loathsome of her. Of course, Hinata was not completely fine. Naruto could tell that she still had a number of issues to deal with, not just with killing. But he knew that this was a sign of her having successfully faced a tough hurdle. He hoped that her success in dealing with this issue would give her some confidence in dealing with others. As the Hokage walked into the room as the last of the Jonin were arriving, Naruto contemplated what he should do. He knew exactly what this meeting was for and was unsure of what to say. The Chunan exam preparations are nearly completed. It's time to decide who will be competing. As I'm sure most of you know, Konoha requires that all Genin applicants enter with a complete team of 3. I will now hear nominations. The Hokage announced, his eyes moving to meet the various Jonin in the room. At once, Kakashi announced that his team would be entering, much to the shock of the room. Asuma immediately followed him in mirroring his action. The room grumbled at the idea of rookie Genin competing in the exams. One by one, the Jonin turned their eyes on him. Naruto considered the pros and cons once more in his head. He immediately thought it was way too soon to contemplate promotion. There were still many mission types that his team had not done and much for them to learn. On the other hand, the fact that the exams were in Konoha allowed for a valuable learning experience for them. If the exams were outside of Konoha, he would have not even considered entering them. Well, Tsukumo-kun, the Hokage asked him. Naruto looked him in the eye before making his decision. Chapter 14. Naruto gazed at his genin as they were standing in front of him, waiting for him to say something. When he had on the spot decided to nominate his team, he had thought that he would leave the decision on whether or not to enter to them. To his surprise, all 3 of his genin had decided to enter independently of each other's decision. He knew that Kiba was likely to enter, for the adventure and prestige it promised, but he thought that Hinata would definitely choose not to compete. To his surprise, Hinata not only showed up on the day of the exams, but looked more determined than he had ever seen her. About the only one he couldn't get a read was Shino, because while he was likely the most skilled of his genin, he was also logical enough to know that it was a bit soon for a promotion. Returning his attention to the moment, he saw that they were a bit exhausted from the forest challenge, but other than that, in relatively good condition. It would seem that the Forest of Death was little challenge for his tracking squad. Well done, he finally stated, proudly. You've passed the second exam of the Chunan exams. Even more impressive, you were the second team to arrive at the tower. His team sagged in relief, glad that it was over. Although they had not even spent a full day in the forest, this particular training ground was no joke. Why don't I escort you to one of the rooms for you to get some rest, and in the morning you can tell me all about the first and second exams? Naruto said, while eager to hear their stories, was willing to wait until his team was better rested. After he had shown his team to their room, he made for his own room for some sleep. As he walked by the other Jonin, he could feel pride at being one of the 2 of them whose team had finished the exams. And while he was proud of them, he was also a bit at a loss. He had meant for this to be a good learning opportunity for his genin, to discover what areas of training they need to get better at and how they stacked up against their more experienced brethren. But he hadn't foreseen them truly getting this far while being in such good condition. These thoughts made him a bit sick, as it felt as if he was wishing ill will upon his team, but he knew that as good as they were, it was too early for them to leave his care. -14. Well, now that you've all rested and eaten, tell me how the first exam went. Naruto started off, as soon as his team had finished eating a late breakfast in the cafeteria. It was just a waste of time, Kiba said brashly, thinking back to his experiences yesterday morning and saying the first thing that popped into his head. Waste of time, Naruto repeated quizzically. Yeah, Kiba continued. We took a written test where we had to cheat off of other people, but at the end they didn't even grade it, they just passed everyone that didn't get caught. Naruto turned to his other genin for a better answer, knowing personally that it wasn't that simple. Thankfully Shino was able to speak up and concisely sum up both the purpose and eccentricities of the exam. While Kiba is correct that the purpose was information gathering, he is understating the significance of the final question of the exam. The final question was a decision on whether or not to face an unknown situation in spite of the dangers involved. Many of the teams that failed that exam were unwilling to face the consequences of failing. Naruto nodded, already somewhat familiar with the situation, but wanting to know more about their experience, let them continue. And how did you know to correctly take the final question? This time it was Hinata that spoke up. Sometimes, you have to do things you don't want in order to succeed. Naruto nodded at her admittance, but was internally a bit suspicious. When he had heard about the first exam from the other Jonin, he thought that at least one of his genin would have chosen not to take the last question, thus being a good learning experience for him to build on. Very good. He eventually said. What about the second exam? That was even easier. Kiba said, more loudly than necessary. How were you able to get your opposite scroll? Naruto asked. Shino replied again with his cold logical explanation. I placed some of my bugs on the teams with less chakra and Hinata was able to spot one of them as being placed in a gate close to ours. We followed them until they stopped to set up their camp and took them down one by one as they split up to gather firewood, collect water, and set up their tent. From there we decided to go straight to the tower before any teams had the opportunity to set up traps around it. Hinata and Kiba both nodded at his explanation. Well, I've said so before and I'll say so again, very good job. Both of these exams depend heavily on teamwork, and the fact that you've completed it so early says a lot about you guys. Naruto exclaimed proudly to them. Sensei. Hinata spoke up quietly. Yes. What happens next? Traditionally, the third exam is a tournament held in front of a large audience, however, depending on how many people pass the second exams, there may need to be preliminaries. -14. Naruto stood on the sidelines with the other Konoha Jonin watching the successful teams stand at attention in front of the Hokage. 7 teams. There will definitely be preliminaries. He thought to himself. As the Hokage and Hayate were explaining the next steps to the genin, Naruto's thoughts and eyes wandered among the various people in the room. He saw the Hokage trying to appear stern, but Naruto knew he took great pride at having 5 of the teams remaining being Konoha teams. Most of the Jonin instructors were looking bored with the obvious exception of Guy. For the first time in a long while, Naruto felt the embarrassment of being associated with the eccentric Jonin. Naruto was knocked out of his thought when one of the genin announced that he would be forfeiting before the matchups could be decided. Naruto inspected the extremely pale-skinned genin for any obvious injuries, but couldn't see anything wrong with him. Naruto narrowed his eyes as his suspicion rose, but was interrupted by the board showing the first match of Sasuke Uchiha vs. Yoroi Akato. As his own genin and himself made their way to the observation areas on the side with the other Konoha shinobi, Sasuke and his opponent had already started fighting. Same as canon. During the match, Naruto observed Sasuke had been infected with some sort of cursed seal, that he had heard rumors about earlier. Sasuke managed to fight it down without taking too much damage as he pulled out a win against the one-trick genin. As Kakashi took his student away for an emergency sealing, everyone turned their attention to the board for the next round. The result. Zaku Abumi vs Rock Lee. Naruto turned his attention to the two genin as he internally grimaced again at the mini Guy. He had heard rumors that Guy had finally infected someone with his youth, but hadn't wanted to see it come true. After Naruto had laid eyes on young Lee, his worst fears were confirmed. Indeed, as soon as Hayate began the match, Lee let out a shout of youth as he charged the other genin. Zaku was able to lift one of his hands and partially aim a wind blast from his palm, but Lee was merely blown back temporarily. In the next second, Lee was once again within arm's length of the Odo genin and launched a powerful kick at his back. Zaku was sent sailing 5 feet as he struggled to get back up. Lee capitalized immediately and knocked the other genin out. As Hayate declared Lee the winner, everyone was forced to watch the celebration between Guy and his student as they celebrated by shouting of the love of youth and with a horrifying hug. Much too late, Hayate escorted them off the floor as he called for the next match to be decided. Ino Yamanaka vs. Sakura Haruno. Same as canon. Naruto watched in distaste as they hauled away the two Konoha genin. The fight they showed was more academy level than genin level. He let himself be torn away from watching them to see who was going to fight next. Neji Hyuga vs. Subaku no Konkuro. The two fighters made their way down from opposite sides of the arena. Each displayed a confidence that was missing from the previous fight. As soon as they both arrived, the proctor started the match. Begin. Both opponents took a step back from the other and fell into fighting stances. Konkuro dropped the large bundle on his back and began to slowly approach his opponent. Neji on the other hand seamlessly activated his bloodline before smirking in a smug fashion. Konkuro charged at his opponent, ready to throw a punch at the Hyuga. Neji on the other hand, merely deflected it to the side before turning and charging straight for the bundle Konkuro had dropped at the start of the match. Within a second, Neji was on top of the bundle, striking key spots with his Juken. Within seconds of the onslaught, another Konkuro fell out of the bundle and tried to get away, only for Neji to redouble his efforts into his attack. Pathetic. To think you could fool my eyes with such a basic tactic. You should have known that to fight a Hyuga was a pointless gesture. Neji said as finished his attack. Konkuro tried one last time to move, but Neji took that as an opportunity to strike him in the head, knocking him out. Dramatically, Neji turned and walked back toward his side of the arena. Proctor. He won't be getting back up. Hayate confirmed the knockout while summoning the medics. Winner. Neji Hyuga of Konoha. The Genin in the arena mumbled between themselves. So far, Guy's team had won 2 of the places in the finals and had won their matches in the shortest times. Sabaka no Tamari vs. Hinata Hyuga. Naruto looked down at his first student to be called down. As expected, Hinata looked nervous at the prospect of fighting someone, especially in a public area. Naruto turned his gaze over to his student's opponent. The girl from Suna had a large fan on her back, indicating she was a wind user. Hinata. Naruto whispered to her. The fan indicates a wind user. If you allow her to get distance from you, this fight will end badly. You must stay close and attack first. Knowing his student as he did, he knew that his advice was contrary to her normal demeanor. Despite the fact that she was a close ranger fighter and had little in terms of long-range jutsu, her shyness and dislike of violence usually kept her far from the action. If, however, she tried to do that here, she would be pummeled with wind jutsus. Hinata eventually nodded and made her way down the stairs to her fight. Naruto did observe that she tried to start as close to Tamari as possible before the proctor started the match. As the proctor dropped his hand to start the match, Hinata burst forward in a speed that surprised everyone that knew her. No one had ever seen her be this assertive for a fight. Even Tamari, her opponent, seemed briefly surprised. However, Tamari, being a long-range fighter, was used to the strategy of her opponents trying to get as close as possible before she could ready her fan. Unfortunately for Tamari, in real-life situations, her opponents would normally not be starting as close as the proctored fight had let her be. Before Tamari could get any momentum to charge her fan for a wind jutsu, Hinata was already upon her. As soon as Hinata was within range, began to strike at points that would disable her opponent. She had already activated her Byakugan on the way over and was ready to take her out. Hinata struck at the center mass of her opponent's body, only to find her strikes blocked with the massive fan. It seemed that her opponent could use the fan for both offense and defense. But Hinata knew that she couldn't use the fan for both at the same time, so as long as she kept attacking, her opponent wouldn't be able to attack her. Tamari herself was growing quite a bit frustrated by Hinata's strategy herself. While she had engaged in taijutsu against her sensei and others in the academy, this was the first time she had been in a taijutsu fight against a real opponent. Normally, she blew her opponents away well before they got close. Tamari continued to mourn this fact while trying to both back away from the continuously attacking girl and block with her fan. After a minute, she began to notice a pattern in the attacks. If she was correct, then in a minute, an opening would present itself to attack her opponent. Within seconds, Hinata began the attack pattern Tamari had predicted. With a strike intended to strike at her shoulder, Tamari sidestepped while using the fan to shield against both of Hinata's dangerous arms. She then gathered as much momentum as she could and launched a kick straight at Hinata's stomach. Although her Byakugan could see the kick coming, Hinata saw an opportunity that she knew she couldn't afford to miss. As the kick hit her stomach, Hinata tried to brace herself, but could still feel quite a bit of pain as it impacted. Trying to suck up the pain as much as possible, she used her right hand to keep the fan at bay, while using her left hand to strike at an unprotected tenketsu on the attacking leg. Temari felt the enhanced bee sting-like attack and withdrew her leg before another one could hit. As she was withdrawing it, she smirked, knowing that while her leg did take a little hit, her attack did much more damage. After withdrawing the kick back to herself and placing it back on the ground, she was absolutely shocked to discover that once she put weight on the leg, she could feel it collapsing in on itself. As she was distracted by what was happening to her leg, Hinata took this as her chance to spring forward and try to land as many hits as possible. While the first attack was blocked by her opponent's free hand, her second attack successfully landed on her opponent's center mass, closing another tenketsu. Her opponent, sensing the danger of an onslaught of attacks, dropped her heavy and cumbersome fan to better protect herself. As Hinata continued to pummel away at her opponent, she was discouraged to find that her opponent was still able to block her strikes, despite having two of her tenketsu closed. She was completely surprised when her opponent was able to find the time to pull a tanto out of her dress. Although it was possible for the Hyuga clan to reinforce their hands to deal with a majority of ninja tools, Hinata was not that advanced. She had no choice but to get some distance from her opponent. While backed away from her opponent a short distance, Hinata knew that she couldn't back away too far, or else her opponent could just pick up her fan and blast her away. On the other hand, she couldn't get too close or she would be cut with the knife. Reluctantly, she pulled out her own kunai and caught her breath in the stalemate. Temari, meanwhile, was in quite a bit of pain. She had learned the hard way that Hyuga strikes were not just bee stings and did considerable damage. She could feel her leg aching and knew that she would not be able to run for a while. The other hit seemed to have missed a little, but still ached horribly. She knew that the longer this fight went on, the more likely it was that she was going to lose. She needed to take a risk and get the distance she needed to finish this with a strike from her fan. Reluctantly, she began to move with her aching leg and began to attack the white-eyed girl with her tanto. She wasn't skilled enough to catch her, but her opponent wasn't brave enough to try and mount a counter-attack. With great reluctance, she sighed and prayed that this would work. With a great strike, she swung her tanto at the girl as her opponent backed away to avoid the strike. With just the twitch of her hand, she then threw the knife directly at her opponent. As Hinata backed away from the more wild strike, she was completely surprised when instead of remaining with her opponent, the tanto headed directly for her. Hinata panicked for just a moment before wildly dodging to avoid the weapon. As she looked at the Suna girl, she watched in horror as she was flying through a series of hand seals. Hinata wasted little time in trying to rush her opponent. Unfortunately, she was half a second too late. As soon as Temari had thrown the knife, she began flying her hands through a series of seals. While she was much more comfortable using her fan as a conduit for wind jutsus, she was not inexperienced at using hand seals. She tried to rush through them as fast as possible while gathering as much chakra as she could, knowing that any delay or mistake would lead her being attacked before she could complete the jutsu. Just as her opponent was within striking distance, she completed the last seal while taking a deep breath. Wind release. Great breakthrough. Because Hinata was in such a rush to get to her opponent, she had no time to channel chakra into her feet to stick to the ground. As such, when the gust of wind hit her, she went flying to the opposite side of the arena. Due to the small nature of the arena, Hinata was barely able to land in a position that wasn't entirely awkward. By the time she made it to her feet and looking to her opponent, she already had her fan in her hand and was preparing to send an even bigger gust of wind her way. Hinata tried to think of something she could do, but Temari left no time for her to think as she put as much of her strength behind her next attack as possible. The blast of wind that escaped from her fan was focused and came right for Hinata with full force. Hinata, who was still trying to recover from her awkward landing previously, only had enough time to send enough chakra to her feet to stick to the floor and cover her head and neck by crossing her arms. Unfortunately, this was nowhere near enough as the wind hit her full force and once again slammed her into the wall. Temari, who was panting heavily due to the last few minutes, paused before launching a second strike with her fan. The hit she had taken to her chest previously was now aching almost unbearably. She knew that she should be attacking again to make sure her opponent wouldn't be getting up, but she wanted nothing more than to lie down and rest. Instead, she merely stood her ground and prayed that her last hit would be enough. As Hinata struggled to get to her feet after the last attack, she felt more pain than she could ever remember. She could feel at least a couple of her bones were broken and her own consciousness was fading with such strength that it was all she could do to hang on. As she was able to get on one of her feet, she started working on getting the second foot on the ground. While she was able to pull it up a bit, the second that she put pressure on her other foot, she felt an enormous amount of pain that told her that there were more broken bones in that foot. As she collapsed on the floor after trying to get up, she could no longer stop the blackness from taking over her vision. -14. Naruto stared at his student lying in the hospital section of the tower. The final portion of the last match had been positively brutal on her. She had 5 broken bones, 3 of which were in her left leg, and a severe concussion. When he had considered the dangers of entering his students in this competition, he knew that this was a very real possibility. He supposed that he should be grateful that it happened here instead of the forest so that she could get immediate medical attention, but that didn't seem to matter to him at the moment. In the distance, he heard the sounds of the current match being fought, Nara versus the girl from the Sound Village, but his attention was dominated by the view in front of him. As the medical nin attending her finished up what he was doing, the man turned to him and began to speak. I've mended the bones, but she will need a couple weeks before they fully return to normal. The concussion was serious, but she is out of the danger zone and only needs rest. Naruto nodded to the man, not trusting himself to speak rationally. -14. Kiba watched as his former academy classmate and fellow troublemaker fight against the Sound Girl. Although fight was probably the wrong word to describe what Shikamaru was doing. He seemed to mostly just take punishment and dodge attacks while trying to do as little as possible. While he eventually did reverse the situation and managed to get a win through trickery and cunning, Kiba was disappointed that it wasn't a better fight. As the girl was carried out of the ring toward medical wing, he could feel his own concern grow for his own teammate there. Inuzuka Kiba versus Yakushi Kabuto. The proctor shouted. Kiba suddenly turned his attention back to the ring where he could see that his name was indeed on the monitor. With increasing excitement he collected his companion and made his way down the stairs to begin his own match. As he was passing the door, he saw his sensei returning from the medical wing. As they passed one another, Kiba saw his sensei give him an encouraging nod. With a large grin, Kiba sent him a thumbs up that promised a quick victory, before going over to face his opponent. Kiba recognized the plain-looking, glasses-wearing boy as being the older genin who had introduced himself to the rookies right before the first exam. As he recalled, the other genin had been in 6 other exams and had failed every one of them. This is going to be easy. Kiba thought triumphantly. His thoughts were interrupted by the proctor's voice. Are both of you ready? Begin. Kiba looked down at his loyal puppy, who had followed him down to the arena. As Akamaru was preparing for battle, Kiba waved his hand in front of him before declaring loudly, "Don't bother boy, this will be easy. I'll finish this match quicker than anyone else." As Kiba said all this, he shifted himself into a more dramatic position and peeked at the girls in the arena, to make sure they were watching him. He was interrupted from his delusions by Akamaru, who started barking loudly. Kiba turned his attention to his dog, who seemed to be directing his attention to his opponent, who Kiba had been ignoring as unimportant. When Kiba finally allowed his attention to shift, all he saw was a blur. His opponent hadn't been idle during the time that Kiba had been bragging. As soon as Kiba's attention shifted away from him, Kabuto pulled a kunai out of his bag, sprinted silently to his opponent, and knocked the ring end of the kunai into his opponent's head. When Kiba had fallen to the ground, Akamaru tried to attack Kabuto, but without the Inuzuka clan jutsus, he was just a small puppy. Kabuto ignored the dog as he immediately placed the sharper end of the kunai to Kiba's neck and looked to the proctor. With little doubt, the proctor called the match for him and dismissed the 2 genin. Tenten versus Masumi Tsurugi. Both competitors made their way down to the arena to engage in their battle for a spot on the big stage. The 2 genin each looked serious and didn't seem to want to engage in any pre-battle banter. Seeing this, Hayate wasted no time in beginning the match. As soon as the match started, Tenten pulled out a couple of kunai from her pouch and threw them at her opponent with pinpoint accuracy. Her opponent quickly dodged and began to make his way over to her, trying to close the distance on what he believed was a long-range fighter. -14. Naruto wasn't paying much attention to the match as he was currently berating and comforting Kiba for the last match. The medics had only needed a minute to apply healing chakra to Kiba's head to fix the light concussion Kabuto had given him. But he can't do that. It was cheap. Kiba bemoaned, trying to change the fact that he had lost so quickly and easily. You're lucky he didn't decide to kill you instead. What did you think would happen if you turned your back on your opponent during a live match? But, we weren't fighting yet. I was. Kiba explained, trying to explain that his opponent had interrupted their pre-match banter. Did you hear the proctor begin the fight? Naruto asked him. Well, then the match was started. Let me guess, you thought that you could demoralize him by acting overconfident. Naruto said. But that's what Sasuke and Neji did. Kiba declared. That may be, but they didn't lose sight of their opponents. You blatantly ignored him because you thought he was too weak to fight. Well, he wasn't. But that's not fair. Kiba cried. Ninjas don't play fair. They take advantage of every benefit they can get their hands on. Your opponent showed a lot of Chunan qualities during that match. Intelligence, mercy to comrades, quick thinking, and silence. But, I screwed up big time, didn't I? Kiba finally said. Kiba, if you learned a lesson about taking ninja life seriously and not treating this lifestyle as a game, I would consider this day a success. Kiba frowned at that, but did not argue. -14. Eventually, the match came to a close with Masumi revealing his stretching, extreme flexibility abilities, quickly maneuvering himself to be in a position of being able to snap the neck of his opponent. A great many people were surprised to discover that Hayate did not call the match then and there. Upon taking a closer look at the scene before them, it was revealed that Tenten had managed to not only produce a kunai in each hand, but to have them against two separate vital places. Indeed, it seemed that while Masumi had been busy wrapping himself around her neck, she had managed to extract yet even more weapons from her seemingly inexhaustible supply and point them directly above his liver and femoral artery. With neither opponent willing to act, Hayate ended the match in a draw. -14. Naruto tried to refocus his attention to the present. As he had been comforting Kiba, he tried to impart a bit of wisdom on how to better himself in the future, most particularly, not underestimating your opponent. Shino Aburame vs Subaku no Gara. Naruto quickly refocused his attention both on his last student and on the opponent he would be facing. This would be the second time one of his students would be facing a Suna ninja, and he hoped it would be a more pleasant outcome this time. This particular Suna Genin looked to be an interestingly intimidating young boy with a strangely large gourd on his back. The boy was already on his way down to face his challenge with an expression on his face that Naruto could only describe as murderous. As Naruto turned his attention on his remaining subordinate, he saw something in him that he had never seen in his quiet student before: fear. I forfeit. Naruto could only blink as he heard what surprised him more than anything else this day. To his knowledge, Shino had never displayed anything resembling fear and had certainly never stuttered either. As the proctor confirmed his forfeit and called the last two genin to the stage, Dosu and Choji, Naruto felt a sudden burst of killing intent focused near him. He quickly isolated the source as the Suna ninja that was frozen halfway down the stairs to the arena. In that moment, Naruto went from wanting to question his genin about his supposed cowardice to wondering what his student knew that he should as well. Naruto shifted himself to stand between his students and the genin that was still blasting killing intent. Why? Naruto queried simply but firmly, breaking his students out of the state the killing intent had put them in. Shino, Naruto could tell, was trying to pull himself together in order to answer. We saw his team in the forest. His team encountered a group from AIM. That boy, he could wield sand almost like I wield insects. He was able to use his sand both defensively and offensively to massacre the other team. But it was more than just power. He seemed to take pleasure in seeing the faces of his victims as they realized they were going to die. Naruto patiently heard all of this while keeping an eye on the Suna genin who had finally decided to return to his own team. He knew that Shino was highly logical and trusted that if his analysis revealed that his opponent was not only too powerful, but also completely devoid of mercy, then as was good enough for him. At least until he saw this Genin in action himself. Meanwhile, the boy from the new sound village had used the vibrations of his glove to finish off his opponent was declared the winner. As the proctor and Hokage were congratulating the winners, Naruto took this as an opportunity to lead his male students down to the medical center to check on their teammate together. Chapter 15. It had been a month since the preliminary stage of the Chunan exams had ended and the finals were about to begin. In the distance, Naruto could hear the excitement and cheers emanating from the stadium as the exams were already underway. Naruto's mind went back to both the day of the preliminaries, as well as the day where he had faced the dilemma of whether or not to enter his kids in the exam. To be quite honest, he was glad that none of his students actually made it to the finals, however guilty those thoughts made him feel. Each of his students were able to get invaluable experience and learn lessons that would aid them in the future. Kiba had learned not to underestimate opponents as well as the dangers of overestimating himself. Hinata had learned that sometimes she had to be proactive in order to succeed. And Shino had learned that when faced with two bad choices, you had to compare the gains with the losses and pick the choice best for yourself and the village. He knew that Shino would take that lesson to heart and learn from it, and he hoped that Hinata's performance was enough to give her a confidence boost to last through her next fight. He just had to make sure Kiba wouldn't revert back to the same behavior over time. Another loud cheer interrupted his thoughts and brought him back to the present. Naruto resumed his walk to the next stop within his current posting. All clear, sir, an older Chunan announced as Naruto entered the small room. Naruto nodded at the older man, taking a brief look around before resuming his walk. Internally, he couldn't believe there were people who actually wanted to do this kind of thing every day. He resolved himself to make sure he got out of this posting as soon as the Chunan exams were over. Flashback 1 month ago. Tsukumo, come in. Hokage-sama. Naruto greeted the elderly man as he once again walked into the large office. I'm sorry that your students didn't make it to the finals. They did well. Truthfully, I wasn't sure if any of them were really ready, but didn't want to deny them the chance to take them when they had home field advantage. Naruto tried to explain. The Hokage nodded, remembering his own troubled team and what they were like when they were mere genin. Well, as you know, village security has been heightened due to the number of foreign visitors we have both in the village and the number of high-ranking visitors that will be coming for the exam finals. Naruto nodded, knowing all of what the Hokage was saying. Because your students did not make it to the finals, I'd like to transfer you to village security for the duration of the Chunan exams. Naruto briefly stilled at this news. It wasn't uncommon for ninja to be asked to serve in village security. In fact, during emergency situations, it was expected that all Konoha ninja work with village security to resolve the problem. Where would you like me to be? Naruto asked. I'd like to station you as the Jonin in charge of the eastern wall. Normally 2 Tokubetsu Jonin are stationed there with a few handfuls of Chunin, but... The Hokage trailed off, looking distinctly uncomfortable for a moment. Is something wrong? Naruto asked, having almost never seen the Hokage with this look on his face. The Hokage looked at Naruto with eyes full of indecision and hesitation. He continued this look, pondering the last few days. Something happened during the second phase of the exams. The Hokage began cryptically. Naruto focused his eyes on the Hokage, waiting patiently, but alertly, for the Hokage to continue. The Hokage kept his silence for a few more moments before reaching a decision. Orochimaru made an appearance in the Forest of Death. Is Akatsuki here? Naruto asked, suddenly on alert. Internally, Naruto was pondering how he would fare against one of the Sannin. The Hokage immediately shook his head. No. In fact, my informant believes that Orochimaru has left the Akatsuki permanently. No, Orochimaru was interested in Sasuke Uchiha. He marked the boy with a cursed seal and tried to recruit him with promises of power for defeating his brother. When the examiner of the second exam caught up with him, he told her that if we stopped the exams, he would destroy Konoha. Naruto pondered the reasons of that last statement. Orochimaru was interested in the Chunin exams and wanted them to continue. Like all Jonin, he was well familiar with the most dangerous criminals of Konoha and knew that nothing good could come of this. So you're assigning all available personnel to village security. The Hokage nodded his head. Anbu will handle the internal village security. Keep your focus on external threats. Naruto thought about what the Hokage was telling him before eventually nodding in acceptance. End flashback. Naruto made his way to the last turret of his section of the village wall, checking to make sure there were no problems before making his way back to the central node of his section. Despite what the Hokage had told him, he was experienced enough not to panic or freak out at the possibilities of something unexpected happening. Indeed, the only thing that caused him any distress at all was what to do with his students. Obviously, the wall was no place for them, especially if something went wrong. So he needed to find something for his students to do, to keep them out of, and away from trouble. In the end, he searched through the long-term D-rank missions before finding one that was right for his students. He found one that he thought would both keep them away from trouble, but also provide them with an important task in case of emergency. Flashback. Yesterday. How is the academy going? Naruto asked to students, each of them displaying different emotional states. PFTT. It's going stupid. I thought I would never come back here. Kiba declared loudly. The other two students responded with more positive feedback, but still looked less than thrilled at their current assignment. Due to needing extra manpower for village security, the Hokage had pulled about a third of the Chunan currently serving in the academy. Most of the Chunan that were temporarily reassigned were the assistant instructors or substitute teachers, so Genin could be used as replacements, for a while anyway. Kiba had been assigned to his old teacher Iruka, who had been given a new class of first years. This was done so that Kiba could have the easiest students to deal with and so that their old instructor could keep an eye on his most rambunctious student. Shino had been assigned to the second years and Hinata had been assigned to the third years. Well, it's only a few more days. After that we can go on a C-rank mission and get back to training. Naruto replied, himself eager to spend some time doing something constructive. In the distance, the academy warning bell sounded, alerting students it was time to get to class. Time to get back to work, Naruto said in a faux cheerful manner. His students grumbled, but made their way to put up with another day of teaching academy students. Shino, stay behind for a moment. Naruto called out. All three students turned, but with an encouraging nod, two left while the third walked back. Once the other genin were outside of hearing range, Naruto began a conversation he hoped that Shino was mature enough to hear. Shino, if anything happens in the next few days I want you to watch over the team and stay with the academy students. Shino paused at what he had said and looked to be deep in thought. Is something expected? Shino began to ask before he was cut off. Don't ask questions that I can't answer. Just know that I stationed you here for a reason. The academy is a strategic target and the students are the future ninja of Konoha. If something happens, their safety is a top priority. Make sure your teammates are safe that they continue to look after the students. Don't let Kiba run off half-cocked to look for danger. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Naruto grabbed his student's shoulder as he said that last sentence and waited for an answer. Naruto could tell that Shino was more than a little rattled by what he had just said, and the fact that he could tell that Shino was rattled said a lot. Yes. I will make sure that all of us stay together and guard the students. Shino replied eventually. Naruto nodded before patting his student on the shoulder and pushing him to get to class. End flashback. Naruto forced himself once again to keep his mind focused on the present. In the distance, he could hear yet another cheer or cry from the stadium, but here it was all quiet. Sir, look out. Several voices from alongside the wall suddenly brought his attention to an area a few thousand feet away. Out of nowhere, literally, a giant three-headed snake had just appeared in a white cloud of smoke. The snake wasted no time in heading straight for a section in the wall 100 feet away from Naruto. For just a moment, Naruto froze, thinking that this was just his imagination running wild for a second. The shouts of his fellow Konoha ninja beginning to panic forced him back to the present. Naruto ran through a quick inventory of what he could do to stop the snake. Naruto forced his attention away from the snake to check the surroundings and found to no surprise that dozens of men were emerging from the forest behind the snake. They were keeping their distance, most likely waiting for the giant summon to create an opening in the wall, which would happen in less than a minute. A full invasion. The worst case scenario it is. Naruto allowed himself to think, despite the obviousness of that thought. I hoped that I would never have to do this, but I have no choice. With that last thought, Naruto began to channel his chakra in a very familiar way to him. He let it encompass his entire body, focusing on manipulating it to grow hotter and contain it within inches of his skin. Back away from me, Naruto shouted to his subordinates, warning them off. -15. Sei Okada, a Chunan stationed at the center node of the eastern wall, watched Agape as the biggest animal he had ever seen headed straight for him. Sei had been a Chunan for 4 years and a ninja for 8 years. He had earned regular promotion for his mission record and his steady growth, but knew that he would probably never be Jonin. He had settled for village security because it was less dangerous, steady work. Realistically, he knew that this was a possibility in his line of work, but never thought it would truly happen. As the serpent drew closer and closer, he racked his brain trying to think of something, anything he could do, but kept coming in blank. Sooner than he thought possible, the snake was almost right in front of him, leading him to turn and retreat. As he turned, he paused when he saw a glow coming from the turret adjacent to his. The glow, which he had not noticed, due to obvious reasons, was getting brighter and brighter. When it seemed that it could not get any brighter, the light suddenly moved and headed straight for the snake. In what could only be described as a blur, the light had suddenly seemed to appear on the other side of the snake. A moment passed, in which time, the snake still moved toward the wall, due to the sheer momentum it was traveling with. Only, when the body of the snake hit the wall, it did so without the necks and heads. At the same time, a mighty crash was heard as the heads had fallen to the ground. Sei Okada took a second look at the light, that was now standing on the body of the snake in front of the wall. Wait. Standing. Sei thought as he gave shape to the light. The light was in reality a man who seemed to be exuding light. No, wait, not light. Fire. -15. Naruto kept himself in a state of absolute concentration. The fire surrounding his body was strong enough to sever the snake's heads from their bodies, and strong enough to do the same to himself if he wasn't careful. This was the advanced level of this skill he had shown the Sandaime and Hana. It had started as just being able to use one hand, but over time he was able to use his entire body. After he succeeded in that, he focused on heating the fire even more. That was the great thing about fire: the hotter it was, the more dangerous it was. There is almost no limit to how hot fire can get. Every time he found a limit of how hot he could get his fire, it was just another obstacle to overcome and surpass. The end result was this. The fire had been enough to sever the snake's heads with almost no resistance and stop the snake before it could do much damage to the wall. However, now he was facing the moral dilemma he had been dreading. The large army before him. Naruto knew that he had no choice. There were hundreds of ninjas already in the clearing, ready to invade, pillage, and burn Konoha to the ground. A closer look at a few of them revealed most of them to be Oto ninja, with Suna ninja appearing near the back. As enemy ninja were still pouring out of the forest, Naruto knew that he would have to stop them. Taking the few seconds he had left, he cleared his mind from all distractions, doubts, and fears. For this, he would need absolute control. With that state of mind, he leapt into the grassy field in front of the wall, seconds before a full platoon of Oto ninja charged toward him. Naruto merely raised his hand and focused. -15. Ibiki Morino, Tokubetsu Jonin and head of the torture and interrogation department, ran with his subordinates to the eastern wall. As the torture and interrogation department would likely have little to do until after a conflict had ended, the Hokage had assigned him and his department to serve as a reserve force for whoever needed it during the exams. Word had spread very quickly about the giant three-headed snake summon headed toward the eastern wall, so that was where he was leading his men now. What he could do to stop such a monster was another matter entirely. Ibiki and the 5 squads of ninja backing him up made it to the inner side of the eastern wall and bounded up the stairs, which they were quite surprised to find intact. As they were rushing up, Ibiki wondered how they had beaten the snake summon here and whether the information they received was falsified. When he finally emerged from the stairway, he prepared himself for the absolute worst. What he saw, however, surprised the heck out of him. To his immediate right was the dead body of a snake summon. Standing alongside the wall were the Chunan who were assigned to guard the perimeter. The odd thing was that each of them was in a state somewhere between shock and wonder. Ibiki turned his head to assess the battleground when he saw the hundreds of foreign ninja on the outside. Ibiki quickly ducked down to make sure his body was covered by the protections of the wall, but immediately poked his head back out to the battlefield. That is where he saw it. What every one of his colleagues were staring at. A single ninja was fighting the Oto and Suna ninja. Ibiki had never seen anything like it in his entire life. One man was fighting an entire army of ninja alone. As he watched, a pair of Oto ninja both fired off a pair of water jutsus at the single ninja. The ninja seemed to dance around the water attacks and merely raised his hand against the two ninja. In his hand, a light started to appear before seemingly shooting out in a burst of intense flames. The two Oto ninja were completely incinerated, along with a handful of others behind them being horribly burned. The cries of the horribly burned but still alive men behind them demoralized the attackers, but each of the Oto ninja knew what would happen to them if they retreated. Orochimaru controlled his men with fear and promises of power. Those who disobeyed or failed him would often end up on an operating table being experimented on, without an anesthetic. The Oto ninja tried to rally and use their superior numbers to overwhelm the single man, but with the ability to send horribly destructive blasts of fire from his hands without the need for seals, he seemed to be unstoppable. When a ninja from his squad bumped against him, Ibiki was jolted out of his current thinking. As he looked around, he could see that he had fallen into the same state as those around him. Summoning his courage and authority, he moved to try and snap his allies out of their state. Snap out of it. Don't get complacent just because they're busy with him right now. Use throwing weapons and long-range ninjutsu to keep them away from the wall. The men and women who both accompanied him and were already stationed here blinked and flinched at the sudden distraction from their trances. Each of them were a bit slow to process what he had said, but remembered they were ninja on the front line of a war. Slowly but surely, the Chunan along the wall began to use either ninjutsu or throwing weapons at the ninja who were too close to the wall. The Konoha ninja were cautious not to throw any near their single ally, but with the hundreds of ninjas still out there, there was no shortage of opportune targets. As the men and women had resumed their jobs, Ibiki moved over to the closest Tokubetsu Jonin to find out who that man fighting was. Report. He asked brusquely. The Tokubetsu Jonin started before shaking his head and starting over. The three-headed snake summon appeared just a few minutes ago and started charging at the wall. Right as it was about to crash through, our commander charged at it and beheaded it with a sort of intense fire jutsu that seemed to surround his entire body. Where is he now? Ibiki asked, but suspecting he knew the answer based on the intense fire jutsu explanation. That's him. The Tokubetsu Jonin pointed at the single ninja who was currently still battling the foreign ninja. Ibiki once again gazed at the powerful ninja, trying to recognize him, but being unable to because of the distance. Who is he? Jonin Tsukumo Hayashi. The man replied instantly. With that, Ibiki's eyes widened drastically. Now that he knew who he was looking at, he looked at the man more critically, trying to spot the face mask of Hayashi. During his observation he also tried to focus his chakra sensing abilities. He was no sensor, but he couldn't feel any of the Kyuubi's malicious chakra. The last time he had sensed it, he had been on a boat further away and injured, but even then, he had been clearly able to feel that horrible chakra. Now, he wasn't getting anything. Was Naruto able to mask the Kyuubi's chakra now, or was he perhaps not even using it? -15. As Naruto sent yet another fire blast from his palm, he felt the fire beginning to get away from him. Outside of training, he had not used this much fire before and it was beginning to him. He wondered how long he would have to keep this up. So far, he had kept to killing the Oto ninja. They seemed to constitute the rank and file of the invading army and were at a low Chunan in terms of power and skill. In the brief times where he allowed himself to split his attention away from the fighting, he noticed that the Suna ninja were hanging back while the Oto ninja kept charging forward with almost reckless abandon. It could be that they were waiting for him to exhaust himself, or studying him for a weakness. That was somewhat fortunate as far as he was concerned. while he had killed a few Suna ninja during the beginning of his attack, they were at a much higher level than the Odo ninja. If they got more involved, he might be in serious trouble. As it was, during the brief glances he had at what he judged to be the Suna leadership, they seemed reluctant to attack him or charge at the not destroyed wall. Naruto had decided that he should keep his focus on the Odo ninja, hoping that if he killed enough of them, the Suna leadership might decide to withdraw. With that in mind, he turned his attention back to the recovering Odo ninja and the fresh ones charging him in an almost suicidal way. -15. Shino stood quietly in the front corner of the classroom. The last few weeks had tried his patience considerably, not that he had let anyone see that. He had forgotten how boring the earlier years in the academy were. So far, his tasks were to keep an eye on the students during the theoretical lessons and make sure they stayed awake, mentor them one-on-one when they were learning something physical like hand seals or taijutsu, and supervise them during the physical exercises. He had gotten the toughest assignment of the three in his opinion. Kiba got the first years, who were so excited with the ability to attend the academy that they behaved well, and Hinata had gotten the third years, who spent most of their year learning to activate their chakra and learn their first jutsu. Hinata had been assigned to that task because of her Byakugan's ability to see chakra from inside a person's body. His students, on the other hand, had mostly book learning and exercise, which made them restless and belligerent, respectively. Shino-kun. The class's sensei interrupted his thinking, called to him. Yes, sensei. Shino replied diligently. The sensei looked at the watch on his wrist before replying. It's almost time for us to hit the obstacle course, but I forgot my stopwatch in my office. Could you retrieve it for me and meet us there? Of course, Mizuki-sensei. Shino replied, leaving the room to head for the teacher's offices. As he left, he never noticed the malicious smile on his former assistant teacher's face as Mizuki turned his head to face his students. -15. Taicho. The man to the left of him questioned. You heard me, sound the retreat. But Taicho, we could overwhelm him if we planned it out and. The commander of the Suna forces damn near backhanded the young Genin that was questioning his orders. The summon was stopped before it breached the wall and not a single Konoha ninja has died. Reinforcements have already arrived and they are taking the Odo ninja down from a superior position. I'm not sending anyone into that death trap without an edge, so I'll say it again. Sound. The retreat. The more experienced ninja around him nodded before dividing to spread the word to return to their forward camp. The younger Genin was still gaping at what he had been told. You want to go charge at that monster or that wall, be my guest, but the rest of us are getting out of here before they run out of Odo ninja to kill. With that, the commander and the remainder of the present forces turned and began fleeing into the forest. The young Genin gave one last glance at the battlefield where yet another squad of Odo ninja were just blasted by another wave of fire before gulping and moving to follow the commander. -15. The Suna ninja deciding to retreat was the turning point of the entire battle. Once the Odo ninja realized that half of their army had left before engaging the enemy and half of their own forces had perished against a single unbeatable enemy, they started to forget about the threat of Orochimaru and focus on the present. For each of the Odo ninja that realized the fact that if they stayed they would be slaughtered, another realized this fact as they saw the original turn to retreat back to their base camp. Eventually, only a handful of Odo ninja remained, who realized all too late that they were screwed as they died against the combined force of Naruto's fire blasts and the Konoha ninja on the wall. After the last of the Odo ninja had been killed, Naruto finally allowed himself to relax a bit and contemplate his actions. He had been involved in battles where the death count was incomparably high, but they were mostly against larger bandit forces. This was the first time that he had fought at full power using the skills he developed to elevate himself to an S-class level. As he turned his eyes across the battlefield, he looked at the destruction that he had wrought. In the distance, he could hear the moans of the men that were too severely burned to retreat, but not enough to die or pass out. For the first time since he was a genin, he felt the brief urge to throw up at the consequences of his actions, before forcing that feeling down. Naruto turned his attention back to his post and saw that reinforcements had already arrived, not that he was surprised by that. In fact, it looked like Ibiki was the leader of the reinforcements, so that was his next stop. With a overpowered shunshin, he managed to make it up to the top of the wall. His appearance had surprised the other men there, but none had tried to act against him. As Naruto gazed across the faces of both the men he had commanded over the last month and those that had come to reinforce him, he saw a new expression on their faces that he had never experienced before: reverence. Ibiki, I assume these are your subordinates? Naruto asked Ibiki, having received a nod in return. Collect the injured that can be transported to interrogation and finish off those who can't. Ibiki stared at him for only a second before nodding and organizing his subordinates to spread out and carry out Naruto's orders. With that done, Naruto moved to one of the turrets to find a place he could sit down for a moment. Before he got more than a few feet, however, a distant thudding caught his and everyone's attention. Naruto, pausing at the sound of the noise as it sounded as if it was slowly getting louder and louder. Soon enough, he could even feel a vibration that seemed to accompany the sounds. Instead of entering the turret to find a place to sit down, Naruto leapt up to the roof in order to see if he could spot where the noises were coming from. From the slightly better position, he was easily able to tell which direction the sounds were coming from. He pulled out a sealing scroll from his pack and unwrapped it to the correct position, channeled his chakra and caught a pair of binoculars as they fell out. Using the new tool, he scanned the area to the east and saw two things. The first was that the men manning the western section of the wall were moving around like crazy. The second was that there seemed to be a brown blob coming straight for them. On his left, he felt Ibiki land next to him and without a word handed him his binoculars. What is that thing? Ibiki asked him as he looked through the magnifying lens. Naruto sighed. Probably another summon. With that said, Naruto looked around to re-examine his post. Things were mostly secure here and there were no sign of any more invaders. Squads of Ibiki's men were ferrying injured Oto ninja to the gates and off-duty Konoha ninja were showing up to see if anyone needed help here. Take over here, will you? I'm going to the other side to see if they need help dealing with that summon. Naruto asked, turning to Ibiki. Ibiki also took a look around, but eventually nodded, agreeing with Naruto's plan. Good luck. With that, Naruto sped off to the western wall, hoping he wouldn't have to fight another army on the other side of Konoha. -15. Shino was combing through the academy teacher's desk for the missing stopwatch, but couldn't seem to locate it. Eventually giving up as a lost cause, Shino went to check the supply room to see if he could locate a spare. Upon finding it locked, he decided to just ask Mizuki-sensei where the stopwatch was and double time it back. Upon reaching the end of the hallway to turn and head outside to the obstacle course, Shino paused briefly in confusion. According to their schedule, Mizuki should have already led the academy students outside, but based on the bugs he had left on the more troublesome students, they were still in the classroom. Regardless, Shino turned and headed back to the classroom. Normally he didn't put his bugs on the students, for fear they would be discovered and swapped, but due to his sensei's warning, he decided to be a bit more cautious today. As he quickly walked back, he looked in at some of the classrooms along the way. To his surprise, he found all of them to be empty. He knew that academy students frequently had exercises and taijutsu practice outside, but he should have at least seen one of them full. A piercing scream interrupted his thoughts as he quickly traced it back to his classroom. Being only a short distance away, he arrived at the door only to find it locked. He peered into the window only to find a sight that shocked him to his core. Inside was his sensei currently in the middle of stabbing one of the second-year students. Mizuki was using a kunai to puncture her stomach and was displaying a deranged, sadistic look on his face. Shino instantly lost almost all of his composure as he heard the screams of the children he had spent the last month with increase. Shino immediately backed away from the door to wonder how he was going to save the children from a scenario he had never foreseen. Like all the doors in Konoha's ninja institutions, they opened out instead of in. Normally civilians did the opposite to avoid hitting people walking in the hallway with a fast opening door, but ninja designed the academy so doors would be harder to force open in an emergency. Unfortunately, they were the worst thing in this scenario. -15. Naruto was only just past the halfway point when he heard the loud crash of the western wall being broken by the second summon. He increased his speed slightly to get there before any more lives could be lost. A minute later, he ran around the last building between himself and the outer wall. As soon as his vision was no longer obscured, he saw the creature that was attacking Konoha more clearly. It was like no summoned animal he had ever seen before. It looked like a huge raccoon, only it appeared to be made of light earth or sand. The creature also seemed to be behaving a bit simple. It seemed to be less focused on the line of Konoha shinobi trying to subdue it with various ninjutsu and more focused on causing mayhem and collateral damage. As Naruto prepared to charge himself with fire nature chakra once more, he hoped he had the resolve to end this fast. Unlike the snakes, which had thinner necks than one might expect, the raccoon looked like it was built for raw power. He felt the flames once again rise out of his tenketsu and surround his body in a stifling warmth. He focused on channeling even more than he had with the snake, hoping that he could finish this before there was too much damage to Konoha. In the distance, he could see that the Konoha ninja had begun to damage the raccoon with the last barrage of water jutsus, not that it did much. It did however turn the raccoon's attention toward the attackers. Without pause, Naruto disappeared in a familiar blur and began targeting the paw of the attacking monster. -15. Shino tested his foot against the outside wall, to make sure he was sending the appropriate amount of chakra to keep himself attached. He tried his best to ignore the screams coming from the adjacent classroom and focused on getting himself inside. Shino had not been able to break down the reinforced door, so he had settled for going into the classroom next door and breaking the window. He was now readying himself to breach his classroom and stop Mizuki from killing the students. He carefully inched his way across the outside of the building in order to poke his head into the window. Inside, he saw the bodies of at least 6 children, and the ones that were still alive were scattered across the room, trying desperately to find a way to escape the carnage. Shino forced himself to remain calm and not jump in half-cocked. He noted with relief that parts of the windows were already broken, due to the struggle, so he would not have to break them in order to get his allies inside. He internally issued the orders as his kikaichu began filtering in through the holes in the windows before hiding inside. He knew that every second he wasted was another potential life lost, but if he engaged the Chunan and lost, all of the students would die. Shino allowed his bugs 1 minute to get in and get into position before he knew he couldn't keep waiting. He swung himself back to the original window of the adjacent classroom. He would need to build up enough speed to break through the glass without getting injured in the process. Nothing would be worse than only making it halfway through the windows only to let gravity impale him on a glass shard still attached to the bottom of the window. With determination in his eyes, he made his move. Gathering speed, he performed a cartwheel on the vertical wall, sticking his hands to the wall with his chakra. He then used his legs to power himself through the window at the apex of the cartwheel turn. -15. Kunio, you always were such a troublemaker. Mizuki stated as he grabbed hold of the Genin wannabe, who was pitifully trying to hide under his desk. He fingered his bloody kunai with his free hand, watching with glee as the boy pissed himself with fright. So far, everything was going according to plan. The invasion should be well underway right now, and the other classes should be meeting with his allies as they made a break for the Hokage mountain interior. He had seen his Genin assistant trying to get through the door after he sent him away, but the door held and he didn't have any way inside. He hadn't heard anything in a while, so his backup must have arrived and taken him out. I suppose I should stop playing around and finish these brats. Mizuki thought, in no hurry to end his fun. Crash. Mizuki immediately dropped the boy and turned his body to the window, where it seemed that his former student had just forced his way into the room. Shino-kun, how nice of you to drop by. Despite his cavalier attitude, Mizuki was more than a bit thrown off by his appearance. Where the hell is my backup? They should have easily breached the eastern wall with that summon and been here by now. He thought furiously. As soon as Mizuki had that thought, he dismissed it as Shino made his move. The boy pulled out kunai from his pouches and assumed an offensive stance. Really? Going to try to take me on? Come on, Shino, you know you're going to die in the attempt, right? Just you and me here. The boy across from him responded. You, me, and the future ninja of Konoha. Mizuki snorted at that. These weaklings, don't make me laugh. If you're counting on them to back you up, you're going to die sooner than I thought. With that said, Mizuki had enough talking and moved forward to take out the single ninja standing between him and finishing his assignment. -15. Naruto focused his powers as he made his way through the front leg of the large creature. Unlike the snake summon he had dealt with previously, this raccoon was not made of blood and flesh, it was made of solid sand. It took a lot of chakra and concentration, but eventually he was able to make his way through the limb and escape before the beast could consider retribution. What the? Which one of you ants did that? Naruto turned to see that the voice had indeed come from the monster he had just maimed. The large beast was scanning the area around him, trying to locate a disturbance. Considering that he was covered in a layer of fire chakra and literally glowing, Naruto didn't seem to think the monster in front of him was high in the intelligence department. The sand limb that Naruto had cut off had hit the ground and was dissipating into regular sand. Naruto glanced at the torn limb, now a pile of sand, and tried to figure out what exactly he was dealing with. A summon isn't made out of sand, what is that thing? The large creature then emitted a large pulse of chakra. The earth began to shake as the ground became soft. The creature then put its body down to the ground, and when it pulled it away, a new limb was attached to the creature. Crap. Naruto said to himself. So, it can regenerate its lost limbs by drawing them from the sand in the ground. Wait. Naruto stopped himself for a minute when he felt the chakra produced by the creature once more. I know that feeling. It's almost like. Naruto took a second look at the creature. More specifically, he looked behind it to see if he could spot multiple tails. Only one. Does that mean it's not what I'm thinking, or is it just that this Biju or Jinchuriki only has one tail? The creature had made back to its original position and started to resume its smashing ways, seeming to ignore whoever or whatever it was that attacked it in favor of having a childlike good time destroying the surrounding area. At a less serious time, it might look and seem similar to a young child having fun destroying a toy block building that another child had built previously. Smash, smash. Naruto circled around the beast, continuously thinking of a way to defeat the monster before it destroyed Konoha. If it is a Biju or Jinchuriki, then maybe it's doing something similar to my seventh tail. I just hope there's a person somewhere in there, otherwise I have no idea what I'm going to do. As he was thinking, he pulled out a sealing scroll that he had carried since the beginning of his shinobi career and opened it to the first position. He had never had to draw upon this seal when not training, and now it was his only hope. Well, he was just glad it wouldn't be for him. The seal flashed briefly and popped out a slip of paper a few inches wide and a little less than a foot long. It was one of the demon suppression seals that the Hokage had provided for him when he first began training his Kyuubi powers. Naruto had always carried it at the forefront of his sealing scroll so that in an emergency he could get to it as quickly as possible. Now, he was going to try and use it to restrain the Biju-like monster in front of him. He suspected that it was unlikely to work effectively if he just stuck it on the sand-covered creature, so he knew that he would have to look for weak point or find the Jinchuriki. Unfortunately, the monster had built itself like a tank and seemed to be able to reform limbs that had been cut off, so finding the Jinchuriki seemed to be the only strategy. Naruto analyzed the monster with a critical eye. It was unlikely that the Jinchuriki would be near in the legs or tail, so that ruled them out. If he had to guess, the guy would likely near the head. He just hoped that he or she was not under many layers of sand. The monster didn't seem too intelligent, so if that was the case, they would have likely suffocated by now, so the Jinchuriki was likely somewhere near the head with their own head exposed at least somewhat. Naruto allowed himself to sigh once more before he began what he knew could be the start of a horrible plan. He just hoped that the monster ignored him while he was climbing on his back as much as he seemed to be ignoring him now. With that, Naruto began allocated more chakra to his legs and began moving closer to the right back leg of the Biju. He prayed to whatever deity was watching that he could be as silent and unnoticeable as possible. -15. Shino moved as cautiously as he could. He had achieved his goal of stopping his teacher from killing the students, but knew that if he failed to kill or incapacitate him, he would resume. If Mizuki tried to hurt any of the students now, it would expose him to a critical strike from Shino. The more time he bought for reinforcements to arrive, the more time everyone would live. Mizuki on the other hand was thinking along the same lines. Only he had expected his reinforcements to be here by now, and every minute that passed without their presence only worried him further. If something went wrong, Konoha forces could be here at any minute. He needed to kill Shino so he could finish off the students quickly and get out of here. With little indication, Mizuki surged forward, looking to take his former student out quickly. His bloody kunai was still in his hand, was already moving to spear the genin. Shino dodged to the right, avoiding the scattered desks that littered the room. With a roll, he created even more distance, before looking back to see Mizuki's next move. Mizuki had not disappointed. With practiced ease, he pulled the massive shuriken off his back and prepared to throw it at his student. With a smirk, Mizuki slightly altered his throw before releasing the massive shuriken. Shino saw both the weapon and the smirk, while preparing to dodge once again. However, he stopped for a fraction of a second when he heard a whimper from behind him. Damn, he thought. If he dodged, the students that had taken shelter behind him would be hit and certainly killed by the shuriken. He needed to block the strike. With practiced effort, Shino flew through a series of hand seals. The students in the room all gasped as their only hope of surviving the day was struck by the shuriken. However, a white cloud of smoke immediately revealed what should have been Shino's body was actually a log of wood. Kawarimi, not bad Shino. But unfortunately, I know exactly where you are. Mizuki gloated. This was his classroom. There was only a few places where Shino could have appeared on the other end of his jutsu, and he knew exactly where in the small space he would likely appear. As expected, Shino had appeared near the doorway to try and unlock the door and take the fight away from the children. Mizuki threw the kunai he was holding to try and catch the boy unaware. The kunai grazed the jacket of the boy slightly as Shino dodged, but more importantly, by then Mizuki had already closed the distance and pulled another weapon out of his pouch. Now that he was within taijutsu range of the boy, he moved to take his fight more physical. With his better developed body, he should be able to overpower the boy and then move on to finishing the kids. With a grunt of effort, he grabbed the boy's wrist while he was off balance from the previous dodge and moved to start pummeling and gutting the boy with this dominant hand. Only, when his fist made contact with the boy, he seemed to explode again in white smoke. Kawarimi. But how did he do that while I had a firm grip on his arm? Mizuki thought furiously, scanning the rest of his classroom for signs of Shino appearing. Unfortunately for Mizuki, it was not a Kawarimi, but a bug clone reverting to its natural state. The bugs that Shino had sent in previous to his entry had hidden themselves in the sub-ceiling of the room and prepared to take Shino's place with their unique Bunshin Henge jutsu. When the real Shino had performed his Kawarimi to dodge the shuriken, the bugs had appeared to take his place while the real Shino hanged into a terrified-looking academy student. Now that the bugs were no longer in their clone form and inches away from their enemy, they were free to attack and suck as much chakra as they could. No one was more surprised than Mizuki as he went from searching for his elusive former student to being covered in bugs that were biting and sucking his chakra dry. Nothing in his ninja training prepared him for this as he panicked and began just trying to swat the bugs away. Ordinarily he would have searched for a water source to jump into or looked to an ally for help, but he was all alone in the middle of a building with nothing to help him. Very soon, he collapsed of extreme chakra exhaustion. Shino reverted from his academy boy disguise and approached his former teacher slowly and cautiously. It would not do for him to appear to win, only to lose if his enemy still had a card to play. But luckily for him, his teacher was completely out cold and he had won the day. -15. Shikaku arrived at the site of the western wall breach with his two teammates, Inoichi and Choza. The Hokage had placed the village on high alert today due to the recent sighting of Orochimaru and the chaos that a Chunan final exam brought. So far, there had been a big commotion at the Chunan exam arena where multiple enemies were spotted, but contained by the village Genin and a reported summon an army at the eastern wall that had been stopped and defeated earlier than expected. When a report came of a powerful summon that had breached the western wall and was wreaking havoc on the surrounding area, Shikaku directed his team to the area to assist with taking the summon down. That's no summon, it's a biju. Choza Akamichi cried. No, if it were a biju it would have more of a sinister chakra presence. Shikaku corrected. Right now, it's most likely a Jinchuriki in biju form. How do we stop it? Inoichi asked, trying to keep his calm, but slightly panicking due to the grave threat to his home. Shikaku remained silent at that question, but was interrupted from answering due to a figure that appeared on the back of the biju. Who is that? Choza asked the others, who seemed just as clueless as him at the distant figure. I don't know, but. Inoichi started when he was interrupted by the biju. He began to take notice of the person on his back himself. Smash. Smash. I'm gonna destroy. Hey. What are you doing? Don't touch him. No. The biju suddenly started to panic as it desperately tried to claw away at the ninja who was doing something on the top of his head. No. I was having fun. The biju started to lose its mass as the sand making up the creature's body began to drop to the earth below. Within a minute, the giant had been reduced to nothing but a pile of sand lying in the middle of a destroyed section of Konoha. Out of the giant sand pile, the figure lifted a second person onto his shoulder and jumped off the collapsing mountain of sand. Let's go see. Shikaku led the way to the figure, along with quite a bit of the ninja forces that were in the area. As they got closer, they could see that the figure was actually a Konoha Jonin wearing the standard Jonin flak jacket, cargo pants, and a face mask. Shikaku himself was one of the only men to recognize this Jonin, it seemed, as most of the ninja that surrounded him were stunned at the feat he had just performed. Tsukumo. Shikaku said in a voice barely above a whisper. It was enough, however, to break the attention the crowd was giving the Jonin, if only for a second. Tsukumo Hayashi merely nodded to the Jonin commander before inspecting the area around him. Eventually he found what he was looking for. Anbu. He stated loudly, looking to his right where an Anbu team was lurking in the wreckage of a nearby building. The Anbu team, not wanting to upset the man who had just saved them, presented themselves to him. Take this boy to a secure cell. Make sure to keep the ceiling tag on him or else he will just transform again. Tsukumo ordered the team while handing the boy who had caused all this over to one of the team members. The Anbu team, while not technically supposed to take orders from a random Jonin, were quick to take the boy and disappear in order to follow his orders. That's it for this part. If you enjoyed it, then like, share and subscribe for the next video as it's going to be more interesting, and also check out my other playlists. Hope you would like them too.